Welcome back to part 14 of What If Naruto Was Told About the Secret to the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Please remember to like and subscribe as it motivates me to upload more in the future, and as always link to the fanfiction is in the description. Chapter 40, A Job Not Finished. Naruto once more found himself sitting in Caesar position within the room that he had first met Moso. Just like last time, said man was sitting before him, his happy smile etched upon his plump-looking face. This man really did remind the blonde Uzumaki of a clown or jester with that smile. I would like to thank you on behalf of Tori no Kuni for solving the mystery of the cursed warrior, Moso was saying. At least, that's what the blonde thought he was saying. Naruto was only paying half attention to the man. He had already heard this spiel before back in Nami no Kuni after the battle on the bridge. He hadn't felt like listening to anybody's platitudes then, he didn't feel like listening to them now. Albeit, for different reasons. Sitting beside Moso was none other than Chishima, the guy who even now kind of reminded Naruto of a puppy. The fact that he was looking at Moso like he was the sole center of the universe really only hammered that fact home. Really, sometimes he wondered about that guy. Naruto. Right. Focusing. You're welcome, Naruto responded automatically simply to be polite. Diplomacy. The one reason he might actually rethink his decision to be Hokage. It wasn't necessarily that he minded diplomacy per se, just that he didn't like having to actually think about what he was going to say before he spoke. If people got insulted or offended by what he said, that was their problem. They should learn to be more secure about themselves and take his words with a grain of salt, damn it. I'm just glad I was able to figure things out so quickly and before anyone else was seriously hurt. And you did a marvelous job, Moso continued heaping on the praise. Really, didn't this guy know when enough was enough? Chom has already made his confession. It seems the cursed warrior was all a ploy to stir up unrest from the public so he could seize the daimyo's throne. Naruto. I know. I'm surprised you managed to get a confession out of him so soon. Naruto rubbed his chin in a look of thoughtful contemplation. I mean, it's only been a few hours since I brought him in. He sighed. And here I was thinking he would have held out a little longer. Well, Chom has always been more of a tactician than a warrior, Moso answered with that damnable smile. Was there ever a time when this guy was not smiling? I suspect he realized that once we managed to bring out all the evidence, he would have no chance of stealing the throne. In this case, simply admitting to his wrongdoings will earn him a lighter sentence. Which essentially meant that instead of outright executing him, they would allow him to commit seppuku. Basically they were going to let the guy commit ritualistic suicide by disemboweling himself in front of a group of witnesses. Not exactly what Naruto would call a consolation prize. So much for lighter sentences. So the bad guy's been caught and it looks like peace will soon return to Tori no Kuni, Naruto hummed. Indeed, Moso stood up from where he sat and walked over to the open shoji screen doors so that he could gaze upon the land outside of his humble home. Peace will come to this beautiful country now that the terror and unrest Chom tried to set upon our society is gone. And with it, your mission is now complete. The man turned his head, offering Naruto that ridiculously large close-eyed smile. I hope you have a safe journey home. Thank you, Naruto said, standing up along with Chishima as the meeting between himself and the odd fat man concluded. With those last pleasantries finished, Naruto found himself walking back to the room he had been allowed to stay in. It was a small room, with the only equipment inside being the futon he had set out and a couple of scrolls he normally carried with him at all times. As Naruto knelt down and began rolling up his futon, Kyuubi decided to contact him. So what do you plan on doing now? I'll leave a cage bunshin here to keep an eye on things, Naruto told his tenant, withstanding the urge to shrug his shoulders. That Chishima tends to get himself in trouble from what I've seen, and there's definitely something up about that Moso character that I don't like. Maybe because he smiles too much. Anyways, my clone will be an eye on them both. In the meantime, I'll need to do a little investigating of my own. I don't see why you're doing this in such a roundabout way, Kyuubi huffed, and though he could not see her, he knew she was crossing her arms under her chest and glaring. If it were me, I would have just killed him. If it were you, you probably would have squashed him flat. Along with the rest of the village, Naruto countered. HMPH. Chuckling a bit at having managed to pull one over on the redhead sealed inside of him, Naruto finished sealing his futon into the scroll he used for camping supplies. He stood up, pocketing his scrolls and looking ready to begin his journey home. It was in that moment that Chishima walked in, carrying a box wrapped in a light blue cloth. Naruto's nose told him it was some kind of food, or at least something that smelled vaguely like food. "Yo, Chishima," Naruto greeted. "Did you need something?" "No," Chishima shook his head. "I'm actually here because I wanted to thank you. You've done so much for my country and Sagi-sama that I don't know how I could ever repay you, and I can't help but feel bad that we weren't able to pay you the amount that missions like this would have normally cost." He held out the box for Naruto to take. "It isn't much, but I wanted you to have this as a token of my appreciation." "Ah, well, thank you." Naruto looked at the box curiously, his nose twitching as the unusual scent got stronger. "So, what's in the box?" "A local delicacy," Chishima said with a bright smile on his face. Naruto felt dread welling up in his stomach. Bean jam stuffed wings. Within his mind, Naruto got an image of a very skinny-looking bird wing with little to no actually substance stuffed to the brim with bean jam inside. It wasn't the prettiest picture he'd ever seen. Just how anyone could actually enjoy the full and meaty taste of bird wings and the sweet taste of bean jam combined was beyond him. This was, of course, neglecting the fact that the bird wings of Tori no Kuni seemed to lack much of the meat that made wings taste good. That does not sound pleasant at all. I hope you don't decide to eat any of those, because I am so not going to be helping you with indigestion if you do. What makes you think I would eat those? Ellipsis. Do you really need to ask? Naruto's eye twitched. Shut up, Kyuubi. Naruto-san, are you alright? Asked Chishima in concern as he saw Naruto's right eye twitching violently. I'm fine, Naruto said, his right eye still twitching. He could hear Kyuubi snickering in his mind as he tried to gracefully accept the gift bestowed upon him by the well-meaning, if naive man. Thank you. I'm sure I'll be able to make good use of this on my journey home. Maybe he could use it to feed the birds. Chishima smiled in obviously relief. Maybe he thought Naruto would refuse. Well, he wanted to, but it wouldn't have been polite if he did. And Chishima was an upstanding guy, even if he was naive. He didn't want to hurt the man's feelings. Thank you very much. I wish you luck on your journey. Yeah, luck. As if he needed luck. Naruto smiled as he stood on a ledge overlooking Tori no Kuni, just taking a moment to get some rest in before he headed off towards his destination. It really was a beautiful scene. The small village looked like nothing more than a bunch of tiny dots to represent buildings, their more earthen colors offset by the blue lines that signified the rivers running through the town. And the village was nestled into a surprisingly dense forest with just the right combination of lakes and clearings to give off the mood of a country at one with nature. It may not have anything on Konoha, but Tori no Kuni definitely possessed a beauty of its own. Well, time to head home, I guess, Naruto said to himself, seeing as there was no one around for him to talk to. Patting down his holsters, Naruto made an about face in order to turn himself towards the road. Without any fanfare, the young shinobi shot forward, running along the dirt road that would take him out of the country. As the blonde disappeared down the road, part of a large stone sitting on the side began to shift and morph. Two shapes emerged from the stone. They were both human. One was large and stocky, with what looked like a wide-brimmed hat. The other was thin, but possessing what looked like a large coat of some kind that went down to its knees. The human-like figures with rock-like skin attributes began to change even more. The many gray hues of rock that made up their skin shifted into colors. It soon became clear that the two figures were, in fact, human. Both figures were male. The stocky-looking one had a face that was just as blocky as his body, with a square jaw and nose and black eyes. He was wearing a drab gray poncho that wrapped around his torso and covered much of his upper body, a pair of tan pants that looked more like a sack that had been cut into pants and was tied around his waist by a piece of cloth. On his head was a wide-brimmed hat, his feet were strapped into a standard pair of waraji, and wrapped around his wrists were a pair of gray bands. The other figure was indeed wearing a coat of some kind, a long, tan-colored haori that opened at the front to reveal a nagajuban, one that was tied together with a black obi. His pants consisted of a pair of gray hakama that closed around his ankles by the fishnet wraps he was wearing. This mon's hair was a light blue, and had a single string that looked more like it was used more for decoration than anything else. He had one large bang framing his face on the left side, and a smaller one framing his face on the right, allowing his larger-than-average black eyes and slightly more feminine features to be visible. It looks like the interloper is finally leaving, the blue-haired one spoke. The blocky guy did not look over at his companion, but responded all the same. Do you want me to follow him? No, that's all right. You go on and report back. I'll follow him and make sure he leaves the border. Right. The two shinobi soon disappeared, one heading back to Tori no Kuni while the other made to follow Naruto, leaving the small roadside empty once again. Moso smiled as he sat in his quarters, idling drinking tea. It was the same smile he had worn during his meeting with that blonde brat, Naruto. Yet for some reason, the look on his face was not mirthful or joyous like the one that had been presented to Naruto. This one seemed to be more malicious, malignant, and just plain evil. Considering he still looked like a clown, the evil effect was ruined, but it was the thought that counted. Bringing the tea back down to his face, Moso's eyes caught sight of a figure kneeling upon his ceiling from the reflection on the tea's surface. The figure turned out to be the same blocky ninja that he had sent to follow Naruto along with his other subordinate. He hoped that meant what he thought it meant. Your report. The Konoha shinobi has been seen crossing the border, the blocky ninja reported dutifully. It appears he is heading back towards Konoha. Good. Very good. Everything was going according to plan. Chom had been convicted of a crime he did not commit and was going to be committing seppuku sometime today after he listed off the man's crimes to a crowd of citizens and defaced him in front of the public. And soon, the cursed warrior would also be dealt with. Yes, everything was going exactly as he intended. You are dismissed. The shinobi kneeling on his ceiling bowed his head before disappearing, leaving Moso to drink his tea in peace. Neither of them noticed the tiny mouse hidden underneath the tatami mats, listening to every word that had just been spoken. Moso also didn't notice the puff of smoke that appeared when the rat was dispelled. Ho! Naruto turned his head in the direction of Moso's home, his eyes gaining a contemplative look. So the fat man is the one behind all of this. Or at least, he's the one controlling the ninja that had been sent to kill Sagi. I suppose I should have expected this. I'm still not sure why you didn't just kill him when you had the chance. Always quick to give her opinion, Kyuubi spoke up from where she was most likely lounging around her bed in the seal. We already knew he was a ninja. You might not be a sensor type, but you have enough aptitude in sensing chakra to feel how much he has. That man's only got the equivalent of what you humans call a chunin. You could have slaughtered him by now. I could have, Naruto conceded, but I knew he wasn't working alone. But I don't know how many ninja he is working with, he answered patiently as he turned back around. He was standing outside of the small wooden hut that he had caught Chome and the cursed warrior at last night. Since he had no leads on where he should go from here to discover the cursed warrior's identity, this was the only place he thought of to come. Plus I don't know if he's the one in charge, or just an underling doing the dirty work for his boss. Huh. Kyuubi gave a monumental sigh. Okay, I suppose I could see why you wouldn't just turn the fat one into a bloody smear on the wall. I still don't like it. You're my vessel. As far as I'm concerned, that makes you my avatar for this world since I can no longer take part in it. How are you supposed to generate a proper amount of fear in humanity if you pussyfoot around like this? Naruto rolled his eyes. Of course Kyuubi would be thinking in terms like that. How could he have ever thought she would think any differently? You don't have to like it, Naruto responded a touch dryly. And I am not your avatar. I just have the misfortune of having you sealed inside of me. Misfortune. Oh. There was something dangerous in Kyuubi's voice. And not the normal kind of danger, this was danger with an emphasis on the D. Am I really that horrendous that you think having me sealed inside of you is so horrible, Naruto-kun? As Kyuubi spoke, her voice taking on a hint of seductive overtones, an image came unbidden into Naruto's mind. An image of Kyuubi, completely naked, with her 9 tails around her as the only things covering her modesty, and they weren't doing the best of jobs as there was far too much skin being shown. Really, the only thing he couldn't see were her nipples and her sex. Naruto's face burned, it burned so hotly that the blonde was sure sticking it in the sun would have cooled it down. He honestly wouldn't be surprised. If he found out that steam was pouring from his ears, that was how hot his face was getting. The blood that had begun dripping down his nose didn't help. Not now, Kyuubi. Naruto wiped at his nose, grimacing as he did so, his face still a mass of mottled red. I need to focus. Kyuubi huffed. Fine, fine. Go do your ninja thing. I'll just sit here, doing nothing, being bored. Pay me no mind. Naruto rolled his eyes. Sometimes that woman could be so overdramatic. Frowning, Naruto looked around the clearing that contained the little, broken-down wooden shrine. This was where he had ran into the cursed warrior, twice he might add. There had to be something about this place that was special. Looking around, there didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. At least at first glance. A closer look, however, showed Naruto something that anyone who was not a ninja probably would have missed. Are those kites? Looks like it. They're all black. How unsightly. The pair found themselves looking at what appeared to be several kites that had been combined together in order to form one very large kite. The kites were all diamond-shaped, and painted black. They were currently hanging from a tree that they seemed to have gotten snagged on. Naruto was surprised no one had come to pick them up. Well, at least now we know how the cursed warrior was able to fly. He used these kites, and since they're black, they blended into the night, essentially making them invisible. The things you humans come up with to accomplish something beyond your nature. We can't all be powerful spiritual entities made entirely from Yuki. Very true. I'm so glad you've finally admitted to my superiority over you apes. Naruto ignored Kyuubi's words. She was probably just bitter about being sealed inside one of those apes, as she called humans by another ape. That woman could carry a grudge with the best of them. Deciding there was nothing more that could be learned from the outside, Naruto figured it was high time he took a look inside. Walking into the shrine, the first thing Naruto noticed was that the place was empty. There was absolutely nothing there. The ground was covered in a thick layer of dust, the walls were barren. There was nothing to indicate that anyone, cursed warrior or otherwise, had ever used the ramshackle shrine before. Of course, that just made the place even more suspicious to Naruto. That there wasn't even a footprint when he had seen the cursed warrior come out of this very shrine not but a day ago was enough to make anyone paranoid. There's a breeze coming through here. I know. Naruto looked around, his eyes narrowed as a soft breeze ruffled his hair. He walked further into the room, trying to determine where the breeze was coming from. It's coming from below us. Kneeling down, Naruto began groping along the ground until he found where the breeze was coming from. A small crack in the floor. The dirt covered it well, but not well enough to mask the breeze coming through the floor. There was a secret entrance right there, and Naruto aimed to uncover it. Pulling out a kunai from the seal written on his hand, Naruto spun the tiny implement around by the ring before grabbing it in a firm grip with the blade pointed down. He found it almost ironic that he was about to use the kunai for a purpose that was close to the original one it had been created for, rather than the ones ninja used them for. After stabbing the kunai into the crevice several times, Naruto finally discovered the reason there was a breeze. A set of wooden doors that were often found outside of houses that led to the basement were embedded into the floor. Undoubtedly, this was why the cursed warrior always came back to this place after terrorizing the town. It was likely that this trap door led to the place where the cursed warrior was quartered up in. Naruto was quick to pry his hands in between the doors and pulled them up. The hinges creaked a bit, showing they were old, but it was a lot quieter than he would have expected. Someone had been oiling these hinges recently. With the doors lifted, Naruto saw the passage they revealed beneath them. A set of decrepit stairs descended into darkness. It was only thanks to Naruto's enhanced vision that he could see through the darkness creeping up from the depths of the passageway. Curiosity got the better of him as he wondered where this passage would lead to. Taking the plunge, Naruto began walking down the stairs and into the darkness that engulfed the passageway. I hate being in the dark like this. Naruto raised his eyebrow at the strange inflection in the young-looking woman's voice. Oh, so even the great Kyuubi has something she fears. I do not fear the dark. Though Naruto could not see her, he could practically feel the scowl she was giving him. Were she able to physically manifest herself outside of the seal, the blonde was sure she would be drilling a hole through his head with her eyes at that moment. I just dislike the feeling of claustrophobia I get whenever I'm in dark, enclosed spaces. I am the Kyuubi no Yoko. Do not forget that. I enjoy open spaces and freedom. That was the whole reason she hated humans so much. They were the ones who took her freedom away, locking her up in a cage so they could use her powers for their own purposes. Oh sure, they might say it's because they thought she was too dangerous to let go, but she knew otherwise. Humans were greedy and selfish. They wanted power, and they didn't care if they forced others into servitude and slavery to acquire it. Well, I suppose that makes sense, Naruto admitted. I know I would hate to have my freedom taken away like that. Really, it did kind of put a whole new perspective on his perception of the woman who was sealed into him. She actually seemed to have a reason for not liking humans. The blonde could only imagine how he would feel if he was locked away behind steel bars. Eventually, Naruto reached the end of the tunnel. Frowning, the blonde looked at the dead up before switching his gaze up towards the ceiling. There was a small square patch that was textured differently than the rest. Where most of the ceiling was dirt packed together and filled with rocks, this part of the ceiling looked like cement. A way out. There's only one way to find out. Naruto nodded, climbing up the wall using chakra until he was standing above the potential exit. The square patch that might very well lead to the outside world was small, he noted, only big enough to fit maybe someone a few inches wider than him. Just how did someone wearing all that armor fit through this? Shrugging the thoughts away, the blonde put his hands against the cement and pushed. Whatever the thing was, it was a bit on the heavy side. Nothing he couldn't handle of course, but something noteworthy. He pushed the object up and then began sliding the panel away, allowing sunlight to filter in through the hole. This was definitely the way out. Grinning, the blonde looked at his new surroundings, pleased to be out of that stupid passage. He was surrounded by a lot of greenery, mostly shrubs, but there were a few trees as well. The one thing he noticed the most was the large building he was next to. It was much more majestic than the rest of the buildings in Tori no Kuni, and it was familiar to him, even if he had only seen it from a distance. That's the daimyo's residence. Within the confines of his mind, Kyuubi chuckled. If that isn't damning evidence, I don't know what is. Now, let's not be too hasty. There may be a perfectly logical explanation as to why there is a secret passage that the cursed warrior just so happens to be using that is near the daimyo's palace. This could be part of the plot to implicate the daimyo should Moso plans to implicate Chome not work out. Do you really believe that? Thought so. Let's at least check things out before we jump to conclusion, nay. Naruto asked with a slight sigh. It wasn't that he didn't agree with his tenant, because really, this was just too suspicious to be a coincidence and not even the most paranoid people would believe his previous proposal. Still, things never turned out well when someone made a conclusion about a situation that ended up being wrong. False assumptions led to death. Enko had driven that into his head quite painfully. A loud splash caught his attention. What was that? Looking over to the side, Naruto saw a large bamboo fence blocking off a large section of the area. Frowning, the blonde Uzumaki carefully moved forward, using all his stealth skills, which were quite considerable, to not make a noise. He eventually reached the fence and leaned in to see what the noise was. What he saw was, honestly, not that surprising. The first thing he noticed was steam. A lot of steam. So this was an open-air bath then. Made sense. This was the daimyo's palace. The second thing he saw were the beautiful surroundings. The placid water that had steam rising up from it, the small waterfall that seemed to be recycling the water, or maybe bringing it in from an underground hot spring. The last thing he took note of, which was really the first thing he took note of, was the naked woman washing herself. He couldn't see much of her because her back was turned to him, but what he could see showed that whoever this woman was, she was incredibly gorgeous. Naruto's face began to redden as his eyes gazed at the small, shapely rear that was just barely visible above the water's surface. It sloped into an elegant backside that was surprisingly toned. Slender shoulders and a graceful neck were visible as the woman's long hair was currently parted at the base of her neck and moving down her front. He watched as she lifted the pail filled with water in her left hand and used it to wash herself, dumping the water on her back. Naruto felt himself gulp as he saw adventurous droplets of water trail a sinful path down the woman's back, right before he jerked himself away from the sight, doing his best to keep steam from pouring out of his ears. Damn it. I shouldn't be peeping on girls like this. Naruto cried out within his mind. That's Ero-sensei's job. I'm not a pervert. Could have fooled me. Naruto was about to snap a quick retort at Kyuubi when he paused. Are you okay? Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be? I don't know. You just sounded a little odd. Are you sure you're okay? I am perfectly fine. Now why don't you focus on what we came here to do? Naruto frowned. Maybe it was just him, but Kyuubi sounded a tad different than she usually did. Whatever. It was probably just his imagination playing tricks on him. Walking down one of the many narrow hallways in the daimyo's palace, a young woman strode forward unimpeded. Her hair, tied into a tight knot on top of her head and hidden by the daimyo's hat, was a lustrous black and her eyes were just as dark. She had pale, snow-white skin and soft lips that were set into a hard frown. Her figure was hidden under several layers worth of clothing, masking her gender from everyone, even her personal bodyguards that were stationed around the palace. The young woman had the look of someone whose heart had long since hardened, her mind stuck in the past, constantly replaying the reason she had taken up the role that should have been her brother's. Tears leaked from her eyes as she stared at the prone figure of her brother. Her mind was left reeling as she tried to come to terms with what had happened, with what the empty husk she now saw laying before her, but found she could not. Saggy. How could this have happened? Her brother couldn't be dead. Not now. He was supposed to be the daimyo and rule over their people. He was supposed to be here with her, protecting her just like he had promised to always do. Why? Why did you have to leave me? Why did you leave me all alone? As tears continued to spill from her eyes, Toki fell forward, her face burying itself on the thick, quilted blanket covering her brother's dead body. She cried tears of anguish into the quilt, soaking it in her sorrow. I can't lose you, she choked out through her sobs. Please don't leave me. Please. It just wasn't fair. First her father died and now her brother, who had been her best friend in the whole world, was dead as well. Why? Why couldn't she been the one who was taken? She didn't want to live without her brother. She couldn't. She couldn't take it. She just couldn't take the pain of losing both her brother and father. Grabbing the kaiken she always had hidden within the sleeves of her kimono in case she needed to defend herself, Toki raised the blade to her throat, more than prepared to end her life. It was the only way she could see to end her pain, to stop the gaping wound of loss she felt at her brother's and father's death. And maybe, just maybe, she would be able to join them wherever they were. She hoped so. She wanted to see them again. Just as she was about to plunge the knife into her throat, she was stopped by a hand. Startled, Toki opened the eyes she had closed, only to gasp in shock when she saw what had stopped her. It was her brother. Only, he wasn't quite her brother. He was pale, translucent. Like a ghost. Toki looked down at the futon to see the body of her brother still laid out on it, then turned her gaze towards the ghost of her brother. Saggy, she stuttered, her emotions inverting upon themselves as shock settled over her fair features. The shock she felt was not just from her brother's death now, but also from seeing his ghost. What are you? How did you? Despite making an attempt to, Toki couldn't seem to articulate the questions she wanted to ask the ghostly form of her brother. Would he even answer? Could he answer? The ghost of her brother held one of her hands in his, while his other hand reached down and grabbed something laying by the futon. Gently, he placed it in her hand, removing his own so she could see what he had given her. It was a pocket watch, a very old pocket watch made of silver and bronze. Toki recognized it almost immediately. The pocket watch was a family heirloom that had been handed down from father to son for generations. Why had he given this to her? Was this some kind of symbol? Was he trying to tell her something? She looked down at the watch again. It was broken now, she noticed. The hands had stopped moving. Toki looked back up at her brother's pale face, her eyes narrowing in determination as she realized what she had to do. What her brother was telling her to do. I promise, your murder will be avenged. Then time will pass once again for you, whose hands were stilled too soon. This was the only thing she could do, Toki realized as she began to don the outfit her brother had once worn. In order to allow her brother to rest peacefully, she needed to avenge his death by killing the one who murdered him. Then and only then would time finally begin to move again and she could pass on to be with her brother and father. Once more, that had been the day where time began to stand still for her, and until she had her vengeance against the one who murdered her brother, she would never be free. Maybe that was why she felt so unsatisfied with how Moso planned on having Chome executed. How was she supposed to get her vengeance if someone else killed the one responsible for the death of her brother? Which was why she had no intentions of letting Moso or anyone else kill Chome. That was her responsibility. Her right. She was the only one who was allowed to kill him. It was the only way her thirst for vengeance would be sated. The only way she could force time to start moving again. Making her way down the hall, Toki slid the shoji door open to her room, shutting it behind and her walking deeper into the room where she would begin getting dressed for the Cursed Warrior's last debut. Only to freeze when she saw there was someone else in the room. "You," she said in shock. There, sitting on her bed was that annoying blonde boy who had the gall to call her an asshole. And now he was here in her room. Sitting on her bed. Such insolence. "What are you doing here? How did you get past the guards?" Hello, ninja," Naruto said, pointing to himself, an unrepentant grin sitting on his face. That look only served to piss Toki off more. "And I came here because I needed to talk to you, Mr. Cursed Warrior-san. Or should I say, Ms. Cursed Warrior-san." Toki's eyes widened in shock. He knew. I don't know what you're talking about." Toki tried to play off her shock and anxiety with a scoff and some anger, both of which she directed towards the blonde. "Now get out of here before I call the guards and have you killed for breaking and entering into my palace." "Come now." Naruto's grin got even wider. "You may be able to fool everyone else, but you can't fool me." The blonde sniffed the air. Lavender and lilac. Not a very manly scent, is it? Toki gaped at the blonde. That was how he had discovered she wasn't a male. Her scent. Toki felt like cursing. How could she have been so stupid as to neglect something as basic as changing her scent? Such a thing had never even occurred to her in the past. Then again, she hadn't really expected to meet anyone capable of sniffing out the subtle aroma of her perfume. She didn't even know ninja were capable of doing that. Or was this one different? "So you found out." There was no use hiding it from this boy. If he could actually smell that she was not a man, then lying would do little good. Wasn't that hard? Naruto thumbed his nose, the vulpine grin still on his face. He really looked like he was enjoying himself. That was something she would have to rectify soon. "The moment we first met and I caught your scent, I knew you weren't a man. No self-respecting male would wear perfume, especially one with such a feminine smell." "It doesn't matter." Toki unsheathed the kaiken hidden within her kimono. She regretted not having her katana or naginata with her, but then again, maybe that was a good thing. Those two weapons were much longer, and while they provided her more reach, they would be difficult to swing in these enclosed quarters. "Now that you know, I can't allow you to live." There was nothing left for her to say. Everything that needed to be said had been said, and now all that was left to do was kill this stupid boy for being foolish enough to interfere in her affairs. She closed the distance between them as quickly as she could, her kaiken coming up to stab Naruto in the chest. It was her hope to end this as quickly as possible. She could not afford to dally here. Sadly, Naruto proved to be a much more formidable foe than she had imagined. The blonde quickly fell backwards, dodging the attack as he rolled off her bed on the other side and got back to his feet. "Oh, not bad, not bad," Naruto said, his tone playful and teasing. She wished she could wipe that smirk off his face. "You're pretty quick on your feet, Haim, but you should know that you're pretty much moving at a snail's pace in my eyes." Toki nearly snarled as she jumped on the bed and tried to slash out Naruto's left eye. A kaiken was not a weapon made for slashing, being such a short-bladed sword. They were mainly used for stabbing, but that didn't mean they couldn't easily slice an eye out if given the chance. Naruto was not going to allow her that chance. Quick as whip, the blonde stepped to the left and twisted his body, letting the blade pass him by a few inches. This girl was quick, but she didn't have the ability to enhance her body with chakra like a ninja or those samurai in Tetsu no Kuni did. Lashing out with his right hand, Naruto knocked the kaiken from Toki's grip. The startled girl gave a gasp and tried to jump back, only for Naruto to grab a hold of the bed sheets she was standing on and give them a quick yank. Toki fell back with a yelp of surprise and a harsh crash, hitting the ground and getting the wind knocked out of her. She coughed several times as her lungs tried to fill themselves with the oxygen they had been so brutally deprived of. It took a good deal of time which Naruto used to grab her kaiken and move to stand several feet away from her so she couldn't try anything. She made to sit up, her long raven hair spilling out behind her head as the fall knocked both her hat askew and undid the knot in her hair. Looking over to see the blonde boy, man, Staring at her with a surprisingly calm look that had not been there before, Toki let out a sigh. If you're going to kill me then you might as well get it over with, she said harshly, causing the blonde to frown. What the hell makes you think I'm here to kill you? Asked Naruto. Toki blinked and looked up at him in surprise, causing the blonde to lose his calm look snicker a bit. You didn't seriously think I was here to kill you, did you? Toki felt her face warm up. She was surprised she could actually feel any emotions at all, much less embarrassment. But for some reason, this man laughing at her for what seems to be an incredible misunderstanding if she were to judge from his words, embarrassed her a great deal. Well, if you're not here to kill me, then just why are you here? She asked, huffing a bit as she stood up. Sighing as more of her hair fell out of the knot she had made to keep it in place, Toki began readying her hair. She then looked around for her hat. It wouldn't do for people to see all the hair she was hiding. Thankfully it wasn't too far from where she had taken her fall, and she quickly scooped it up and put it back on her head. She then looked over at the blonde, who was staring at her with a strange look. What are you looking at? Blinking several times, as if just now realizing what he was doing, the blonde offered a shrug. Sorry, I was just thinking about how you look much nicer with your hair down, he replied honestly. His words caused another reaction in Toki, who felt herself feeling a bit flush again. It wasn't that he was complimenting her. Before she had put up the charade of pretending to be saggy, men had complimented her all the time and it hadn't bothered her then. No, the reason she was feeling flustered was because of how unassuming his tone was. It was like he wasn't actually complimenting her and just stating an honest opinion. Whatever, Toki huffed, turning her head to the side a bit in a poor attempt to hide her blush. Not that it was needed. Naruto didn't seem to be paying attention to it anyways. Shaking her head, she decided to try and finally get down to business and discover why the blonde was here. Now why don't you tell me why you're here, and be quick about it? Alright, yeesh, Naruto grumbled. You need to learn to relax, Haim. When Toki just glared at him, the blonde Uzumaki sighed. The reason I'm here is because. Before Naruto could even begin to give out his explanation, which he felt was pretty damn important seeing how it could mean the difference between sending an innocent man to the gallows, so to speak, and letting him live, the shoji screen door was practically slammed off its hinges as a soldier rushed into the room with little heed for the current situation. Sagi-sama, I bring you urgent news. We just found, E.H. The random soldier who had barged into the room looked between Toki, who thankfully had her hair hidden and now looked like her brother, Naruto, who was just looking confused, and the bed that looked like it had taken a heavy beating. Sagi-sama. The soldier squeaked, his voice rising several decibels. His face was turning red too. Obviously, he had come to an entirely wrong conclusion about what was happening in his daimyo's bed quarters. I had no idea you were into that kind of thing. At the man's words, Toki found herself groaning. This was just what she needed, someone believing that she was gay and they had just interrupted her with her male lover. Why was this happening to her now? All she wanted to do was get revenge on the bastard who killed her father and brother. Was that too much to ask? Well, Naruto chuckled a bit. He sounded more amused by the whole situation than offended. Bastard. This is kind of an awkward situation. Shut up, Toki snapped, before whirling on the hapless guard. And you. This isn't what it looks like. Of course, the man stuttered. He seemed to still be trying to come to grips with the fact that his daimyo might be gay if he weren't actually a she in disguise. Not that he knew that. Hence the coming to grips part. You said you had important news, Naruto pressed, causing Toki to blink. That's right. He had come barging in saying he had urgent news. What did you want to tell me? She asked, her voice sounding very much like her deceased brother's now that she was with someone who didn't know her true identity. That's right. The man snapped back into focus as he was reminded of the urgent news he had to give his leader. He cast a suspicious glance over at the blonde, who merely waved at him with a cheerful smile. You can trust him, Toki said, sighing a bit as she realized there likely wasn't much she could do to make him leave anyways. This is the ninja from Konoha that was responsible for apprehending Chom. Right, the guard still didn't seem sure of what to think, but at least was game enough to just ignore the awkward situation for now in favor of delivering that news he had considered urgent enough to barge into his daimyo's bed quarters were. We just found Chishima. He was washed up on the shore of the river and it looks like he was severely injured. He's being treated as we speak. What? Toki almost slipped out of her saggy persona at the news. Her friend was injured. When? How? Take me to him. Of course, Sagi-sama. The guard snapped off a salute and began exiting the bed chamber. Toki moved to follow, only pausing when she saw Naruto come up alongside of her. I'm coming too, Naruto said, his face surprisingly serious. I have some information you're going to need to hear. I'm pretty sure I know who attacked Chishima. Toki was surprised by the news, but quickly nodded as they both hurried to catch up to the guard as he got further and further away. She would hear his news later. Right now, she had a friend who was injured. A friend who, despite her being cold too, still meant a lot to her. After she determined that her friend was safe, she would listen to Naruto's words. And then she would get her revenge on those who wronged her. Chapter 41, Ronin. Chishima. Toki's shout was preceded by her rushing into the room where her friend was lying on a bed. Less than a second behind her was Naruto, who walked in much more calmly than his current hidden gendered compatriot. As he moved over to stand beside Toki, who was now kneeling down on the bed and looking at her friend with barely concealed concern, Naruto let his eyes wander towards the young man laying out on the bed. Chishima's body was bandaged fairly well, and it looks like they had been changed recently. Even still, blood was beginning to seep into the white bandages at a slow yet steady rate. Naruto's eyes focused on what he could discern from the wounds while they were covered and, judging merely from the way they were bleeding, determined they had most likely come from a projectile. Likely a shuriken, as they tended to do more damage than a kunai. Chishima was also hooked up to several machines meant to monitor his vital signs, an IV drip that was putting lost fluids back into his body and a breath mask that was being used to help regulate his breathing, meaning he had likely suffered damage to his lungs. Naruto listened to the steady beep coming from one particular machine that monitored his heart rate, the man's steady breathing the only accompaniment to the noise. We found him washed up on the riverside near the old shrine just an hour ago, the guard who had accompanied them said to Toki, who was still in her guise as Sagi. He was half-conscious and kept mumbling about how he had something important to tell you. Despite the fact that Toki was obviously not paying much attention to him, the soldier shouldered on. He's stable now, but he was in pretty bad shape when we got him here. I see, Toki said in her male persona voice as she finally turned away from the sight of her friend lying unconscious on the bed. Thank you for informing me of this. You may leave now, my lord. The soldier snapped off a salute, took another glance at Naruto, before turning on his heel and marching out the door. Silence permeated the room, the only sound being the steady beep of the monitors and Chishima's fitful if slightly ragged breathing. Toki looked at her best friend, worry evident on her features, before turning to Naruto. You said you had something you wanted to tell me, Toki prompted. Now that they were alone, her voice no longer sounded like a male's. There was no use in masking her voice in front of him. Yes, Naruto shifted. Unlike before, when Naruto had snuck into her room, his countenance was serious instead of playful. I believe I know who attacked Chishima. Go on, Toki gestured for the blonde to continue. He gladly did so. After I caught sight of Chome meeting with the cursed warrior, I felt everything was far too convenient. The response of the guards when it came to arresting Chome was too quick, it was almost as if they had been ordered to apprehend him before I had even caught him in the act. And then there was his quick confession. Naruto's eyes narrowed. I looked up what I could on his past, and Chome was supposed to be Tori no Kuni's most prominent tactician, and a decently skilled warrior. A man like him would not be so quick to confess his crimes, had he committed them, without some serious encouragement. What are you saying? Asked Toki, her own eyes narrowing. What I'm saying is that Chome was not the one responsible for the unrest happening in your country, nor was he the one who killed your father and brother. Toki's eyes widened in shock. It was Moso. Moso. Toki's voice betrayed her surprise. But, how could that be? Moso is nothing more than a wandering old man. A peddler who managed to gain my father's good graces and become this kingdom's advisor through his parlor tricks. Parlor tricks. Naruto blinked at the term, but quickly shook his head. He didn't need to know. I don't know much about the man's past, but I can assure you Moso is the one responsible for everything that has happened so far. After apprehending Chome, I created 2 shadow clones. One left the country in my stead in order to fool anyone who might have been following me to make sure I left. The other stayed at Moso's residence hidden as a mouse. It saw Moso ordering a Ronin to give him a report on whether or not I had left. Ronin. Ronin are like missing nin, Naruto said in response to Toki's question. Except, unlike missing nin, these shinobi never had a home to go missing from. I heard from Anko Ne-chan that they are ninja who wander the world stealing jutsu from other hidden villages. Anko had actually clashed with a few of them before. Apparently, they had tried infiltrating Konoha a time or two, and at least one of those times one of their numbers was caught. He killed himself before Anko could get anything out of him, but it let her know of their existence. Toki stared at him, her eyebrows furrowed as she thought of everything she had just been told. Could she have been wrong? Could it be possible that Chome was not responsible for the death of her brother and father? That it was actually Moso who killed her family? Everything he says is true, Sagi-sama. Two heads jerked in the direction of the bed to see Chishima, his eyes barely open, looking at Toki still hidden in her saggy disguise. It was a wonder the man was even awake considering the state he was in. Chishima. Everything Naruto just told you is true, Chishima continued as Toki knelt down by the bed once more. I saw him talking to several ninja with my own two eyes. He mentioned something. Chishima's eyes began to droop as he spoke. He was likely on drugs to dull the pain he was undoubtedly in. He said they had found what they were searching for. What they were searching for? Toki questioned, frowning. She turned her gaze towards Naruto, who shrugged his shoulders as if to say, "Don't look at me, I don't know what he's talking about." Sagi-sama, Chishima gasped, bringing attention back to him. You must, Chishima. Toki's eyes widened as Chishima's eyes closed and his body went completely slack. Chishima. Relax, Naruto placed a hand on the woman's shoulder to try and calm her down. Look, he's just sleeping. I'm surprised he even woke up. It looks like those doctors put some serious anesthetics in his system. I'm surprised you know what anesthetics are. Naruto barely managed to keep from frowning. Was it just him, or was Kyuubi being a bit more belligerent and haughty than she usually was? I've been in a hospital enough times to have picked up a few things. It probably helped that the doctors had often been forced to drug Naruto near constantly in order to keep him in bed, otherwise he would sneak out. He hated hospitals. So you were right, Toki stood up, her eyes narrowed in anger. It was Moso who betrayed me and my family. If it's any consolation, I doubt he was ever loyal to you at all, Naruto said bluntly. I'm pretty sure he was just here to find whatever it was he was searching for, and got into your father's confidence to improve his chances of finding it. That doesn't really help, Toki deadpanned. Well, can't say I didn't try, Naruto shrugged. Before giving Toki a serious expression. Now that you know who really betrayed you and your family, what do you plan to do about Chome? Nothing. What? Naruto blinked. He stuck his pink in his ear as if to clean it out. I'm sorry, I think I had something crazy stuck in my ear. Could you repeat that? I said I'm going to do nothing, Toki told him bluntly. If I rescue Chome then Moso will know that I'm onto him. If he knew that I knew about him, it would be nearly impossible to get my revenge. Naruto's eyes narrowed at what he heard. So you'd sacrifice an innocent man for the sake of your revenge. That is not how a daimyo is supposed to operate. It's your job to protect those who work under you. There is nothing that I can do. Toki looked away from the blonde, unable to peer into those accusing eyes. Chome is guarded by an army of soldiers. We could never save him by anything less than starting a civil war. Would you just listen to yourself for a second? Naruto grit his teeth as he forced himself to remain calm. Are you or are you not the daimyo of this land? Who the hell do you think controls the soldiers here? If you ordered them to stand down, they would stand down. Under the blonde's accusing stare, Toki turned away. There was something incredibly unnerving about that glare. TCH, Naruto scoffed. Fine, if you're not going to do something, then I guess it will be up to me. Turning around, the whisker-marked shinobi began walking towards the door, preparing to mount a rescue mission of Chome. Unlike Toki, he was not willing to allow someone to die for the sake of maintaining secrecy. Not like there was any point in trying anyways. If that Moso guy was as well informed as Naruto believed, then he likely already knew who the real cursed warrior was and would be dealing with Toki soon enough. Hey! Toki shouted in shock as she saw the blonde walk away from her. Where are you going? Naruto paused. He did not turn around, but he did turn his head to look at the woman who was staring at his back in shock. Isn't it obvious? I'm going to do what you can't. Or should I say, what you won't. It just wasn't in Naruto's nature to leave someone to their doom if he could save them. He wouldn't say it was a hero complex so much as it was his belief on helping others if you were able. If someone had the power to make a difference, then they should put it to good use. And Naruto had the power to make that difference here. Toki bit her lip in frustration as she watched the blonde leave. Should she go after him? What would she do if she did? What would she say? What could she say? Was there even anything that needed to be said? As much as she didn't want to admit it, the young blonde had gotten to her more than she thought. There was just something about the way he spoke, the look in his eyes, and that disapproving frown on his face that made her feel like a child who had disappointed her parents. It was almost like her brother was staring at her with disapproving eyes instead of the blonde, even though the two did not look or even act remotely similar. She looked from the door to Chishima and sighed. Toki could do nothing about Naruto right now. He was probably already gone to save Chome, but she could at least look after her friend until he got back. XOX. Chome found himself being led into a clearing surrounding by the traditional high wall with sloping tiled roof on all sides. His arms were bound to his torso by rope, and his hands were similar bound except the rope was extended like a leash so the soldier in front of him could hold it and lead him around. Surrounding him on either side were soldiers, their hands resting on the hilt of their katanas, prepared to cut him down should he try to escape. The situation looked very bleak. As he was led towards the spot where he would be forced to commit seppuku, Chome eyed his surroundings. Moso was sitting in the center of a table that was set up on a veranda that elevated him above everyone else. He was being protected by several guards standing on either side of him. It looked like Moso meant for this to be a spectacle. On the other end were several dozen guards, all of them standing before what looked like the entire civilian populace. Chome could see hundreds of faces, all of them staring at him with mixed looks. Some looked in shock, others disgust, some pity and still some confusion. Yes, there was no doubt Moso wanted everyone to witness this event in order to cement his place as their savior. A well-played move. Forced to kneel down in front of the veranda upon which Moso sat, Chome remained inexplicably calm in the face of his demise. If this was to be his end, he would not do so by groveling before this man. Moso picked up the scroll that had been laid out on the table before him, breaking the seal and unrolling it even though he likely already knew the contents. He should. He was the one who wrote it. Bringing the scroll to his closed-eyed face, Moso spoke. A verdict has been reached, Chome Dono. His grave voice rang throughout the clearing where Chome's execution would take place. He was good actor, if nothing else. Betraying your position as chief tactician to Arlade Awashi-sama, you conspired in his assassination, as well as his daughter Toki-sama. Hushed and startled whispers broke out among the crowd of civilians. The rustling of fabric as those in the back tried to get a closer look at the proceedings was only superseded by those up front who were leaning into each other, their hands up to their mouths so they could share their opinions with the person closest to them without interrupting. Several samurai watched the civilians carefully, taking care to watch for possible dissidents among the crowd. Chome remained calm, impassive. It was like looking at stone. He would not be quailed under this man's accusations. Furthermore, you and your subordinates were responsible for creating the apparition known as the Cursed Warrior. Your purpose being to spread panic among our people, undermine the authority of Sagi-sama, and usurp his role as daimyo of Tori no Kuni. You are a traitor of the worst kind. That did elicit a response from the so far quiet man. Chome looked up at Moso, his eyes narrowed slightly in contemplation. Chome Dono, you must pay for what you've done. Gasps erupted from the crowd at those words. Shock rippled through the people and the speaking began to get louder as the seconds passed. All that was second to Chome's laughing, however, which started off soft but began to pick up volume as the seconds ticked by. I see. So that's your game, Moso. Chome's head was bent down towards the ground, his eyes just barely visible. It didn't last. Chome's head shot up so he could glare at Moso with all the hatred and anger he could muster. You've finally sprung your trap. Moso's eyes finally opened so he could stare at Chome with a half-lidded gaze. There was frown etched on his face. "I'm disappointed in you, Chome," he said. "If you're a warrior then at least die like one." He looked towards the guards surrounding the man and the executioner standing by in case Chome did not commit seppuku. "Help him carry out his sentence." At once, Moso-sama. One of the guards moved behind Chome, forcing him to sit in a more upright position as opposed to the slouch he had been in. The executioner, meanwhile, raised his blade in preparation to take Chome's head should he fail to kill himself. Chome opened the front of his loose-fitting white kimono, exposing his scarred torso for all to see. A few of the scars were recent, as in, less than a day recent. These ones were given to him courtesy of Moso's men doing a number on him to get a confession out of him. He picked up the small kaiken, the dagger which he would use to commit ritualistic suicide, and unsheathed the blade. Holding it in a reverse grip, Chome prepared to plunge the dagger into his stomach. Before the dagger could reach him, a loud hissing sound erupted all around the clearing. Purple mist began to cover the area, thickening with each passing seconds. Before too long, the entire execution ground was covered in a blanket of purple mist so thick people had trouble seeing their own hands unless they were brought directly to their face. What's going on? Moso and everyone else looked around at the strange mist that had covered the area, as if doing so would help them discern where the mist was coming from. It was a futile gesture, however. The only way they would be seeing anything more than 6 inches in front of them was if they blew the mist away with a wind jutsu or, failing that, waited for it to dissipate naturally. Even Chome was looking around at the surrounding blanket of purple haze, feeling both wary and cautious. He was not sure what to make of this, but he did have a hunch. And if his hunch was right, never mind, kill him now. As Moso's orders came through the fog, the words enough to penetrate the shock that permeated those surrounding Chome. The executioner quickly prepared his sword, readying a strike for where he knew Chome was based on where he had last seen the man. It was a strike that would never hit. Before the executioner even had a chance to stroke his blade down on Chome's neck, an armored figure appeared before him. A warrior clad in white armor with a red oni mask. The cursed warrior. The cursed warrior reacted far more quickly than the executioner did, bringing the butt end of his blade towards the executioner's stomach before the man could even blink. There was a loud whooshing of air from the man meant to kill Chome as he was hit with the hilt of a katana in the solar plexus. It was such a jarring hit that not only was he deprived of much-needed oxygen, but his eyes rolled up in the back of his head and he slumped to the ground. No one inside of the mist could even see what was happening. No one, except for the cursed warrior apparently, who was already moving in on his next target. The man he targeted was not even aware of what was happening when he received a chop on the back of his neck. He too fell to the ground with a dull thud, unconscious before his body hit the dirt. One by one the guards surrounding Chome fell to the physical prowess of the cursed warrior until, just like that, there was no one guarding the man slated for execution. And with nothing left to guard him, Chome was ripe for the taking. Plucking the startled man from his spot on the ground, the cursed warrior picked up Chome and held him under his arm like a sack of potatoes. Seeing how there was nothing left to, the white armor-clad warrior held up his hand and, much to the shock of Chome, both he and the one carrying him suddenly shot off the ground and into the air, leaving the execution ground still covered in thick, purple mist behind. XOX. Naruto sighed as he found himself soaring through the air using those kites he had found a while back. His other arm still had a tight hold of Chome, who was staring at him with a slightly stupid expression of shock. He wasn't really paying attention to that man right now, though. There were more important things to worry about. Sweet Cammy. Why the hell is it so hot in this thing? Well, it is. A suit of armor. You know, metal. Metal tends to get hot when it's in the sun. I think I finally understand why Toki always did her cursed warrior business during the night. It had nothing to do with cover of darkness and everything to do with how fucking hot it is in this thing. How samurai could stand to wear this crap is beyond me. Complaining about the heat aside, Naruto also had to steer the kites that he was using to fly him and Chome to their destination. Deft turns and flicks of his wrist allowed him to make the minute adjustments needing to control where they were being taken. It wasn't long before his maneuvering managed to bring the two of them to their destination, the rundown shrine where the cursed warrior often made its appearance. As he sat down, the blonde ninja disguising himself as Toki who disguised herself as Sagi who disguised himself as the cursed warrior, that's a mouthful, let Chome stand on his own 2 feet. The chief tactician for Tori no Kuni used this opportunity to look at the armored figure standing before him, as if doing so would somehow allow him to discern who was hidden behind the mask. Sagi-sama, is that you? He asked. Naruto tilted his head, as if pondering the question. He really wasn't, but there was no need to tell this guy that. Eventually, he began walking towards the shrine, gesturing for Chome to follow him. The man did so after only a moment's reluctance. Naruto, Kyuubi's voice suddenly came to him through the seal. I sense a chakra signature exactly 10 meters to your left. So Moso was expecting something like this, Naruto hummed thoughtfully. It's a good thing we planned for him to know what we were planning, that way we could countermand any plan he has in the works. Hehe, sometimes I even amaze myself. That's not a very hard thing to do, Kyuubi quipped, causing Naruto to frown. Such a mean thing to say. XOX. As a cursed warrior disguised Naruto and Chome entered the shrine and descended the staircase, one of the rocks scattered across the clearing shifted on one side as a man with rock-colored skin stepped out. The skin and clothes he was wearing changed back into their normal colors. The blocky-looking man stood before the shrine, a smirk on his face. He had been waiting here for a while now. Moso had been very sure that the cursed warrior would make an appearance and save Chome once news that Chishima's body had not been found came to him. It looked like all that forethought and planning had paid off. Now all he had to do was report to Moso and inform him of where the cursed warrior and Chome were headed, and they could take out both nuisances in a single strike. Just then a strange feeling passed over him. It sort of felt like a soft breeze had ruffled the back of his neck, but it was slightly different and there was a stinging sensation following it. A second later the blocky ninjas, whose name was never learned, head slid off his body with only a little bit of blood flowing out due to how clean the cut was. As the head rolled along the ground and came to a stop near the foot of the shrine, the body crumpled to the dirt like a puppet with its strings cut off. A clone of Naruto stood behind the now dead ninja, his left hand holding onto Kubikirabucho, the blade glowing with a light sheen of green light that coated it like a second skin. Sticking his blade point first in the ground, Naruto held out his left hand, palm pointed towards the headless corpse. A ball of flame appeared before the palm. It was about the size of a small ball, and brilliant white in color. The flame looked very much like a miniature sun. Kitsune by Fox Fire. Launching the small ball of fox fire at the deceased ninja, Naruto watched dispassionately as the flames spread across the body, blackening and burning it until there was nothing left but ash that soon scattered on the wind. Another burst of fox fire and the head near the shrine was destroyed as well. With his mission done, the Naruto clone dispersed itself in a cloud of smoke, altering the real Naruto that he had accomplished his mission. XOX. That was kind of pathetic, Naruto thought as the memories of his clone hit him. Are all Ronin supposed to be so weak? He didn't even feel my clone sneaking up on him. How should I know? It's not like I've ever dealt with Ronin, unless you count the ninja who were around before the birth of the hidden villages, but they at least had clans. You've fought ninja before? Asked Naruto, before realizing everything his statement entailed and hastening to correct it. I mean aside from when you were attacking Konoha. Of course, Kyuubi said, and Naruto got the feeling she was flipping her hair at him in a gesture of haughty arrogance. I have fought many shinobi in my time, both in my fox form and my human form. I have even fought your Shodai Hokage. Really? The first time I was actually in my human form. Apparently, I had not been as careful as I usually was when manipulating you humans and someone had put a hit on me. Long story short, he and I fought. I managed to win, but he escaped. Naruto didn't know what bothered him more, how Kyuubi could speak so casually about using humans, or how he wasn't even getting angry like he used to. Wait, I thought the Shodai's Mokuten was able to suppress your Yuki. How did you manage to beat him? For starters, he didn't use his Mokuten. He didn't know who I was, and as I was using my fox fire, which is hot enough to turn anything it touches into ash, he probably didn't think it would matter. Huh, you learn something new every day. After reaching the exit, Naruto crouched down after sliding the lid out of the way. Linking his hands together, he looked over at Chome, making it clear what he wanted from the man. A nod was his answer. Chome walked up to Naruto and stepped onto his linked hands, allowing the armor-clad blonde to hoist the man up so he could pull himself out of the exit. Naruto followed soon after, jumping through the exit with a chakra-enhanced push. His bulky, armored frame was just barely small enough to scrape through. "This is the daimyo's palace," Chome said, turning to the blonde as he dusted dirt off his armor. "So it's true, Sagi-sama, it is you." Naruto wondered if he should correct the man, but decided not to. Technically speaking, he was right, sort of. Though the fact that Sagi was actually Toki, he wasn't really right either. Whatever. He would leave explaining everything to Toki. Gesturing with his hand for Chome to follow him, Naruto led the man through a hidden door that led into the daimyo's palace. Chome followed him as he walked down the narrow path, coming out behind a hidden door hidden behind a portrait. A few more twists and turns and Naruto finally came to the room where he had left Toki. He entered the room, Chome behind him, to see that Toki was pretty much exactly where he had left her, sitting at Chishima's bedside. Chishima was also where he had left him, laying unconscious on said bed while being hooked up to numerous medical devices. As they walked in, Toki looked up, and Chome stopped in shock. Sagi-sama. He looked back and forth between Naruto and Sagi. "But I thought that, I could have sworn Sagi-sama was the cursed warrior." "Oh, he is," Naruto said, putting a very slight emphasis on the word he. Toki narrowed her eyes. "I was just borrowing this for a little while so I could mount my rescue mission." "I see," Chome frowned. "Then, who are you, exactly?" Naruto grinned as he placed a hand on the Oni mask and pulled it off, revealing his face to the chief tactician. Chome's eyes widened. "You're that Konoha shinobi from the other night." "Wow," Naruto's dry voice cut through the air. "You're pretty smart to have figured that out all by yourself." He looked over at Toki, who was glaring at him. "Anyways, why don't we let Sagi explain everything so you can get up to date on what's happening?" XOX. "I see, so Sagi-sama disguised himself as the cursed warrior in order to lure out the person behind Awashi-sama's and Toki-sama's death." Chome and Sagi were now sitting in seiza position on the floor several meters apart from each other. Toki had just finished explaining everything that had happened up to this point, and Chome was nodding along as she finished her tale. Naruto was standing several feet behind Chome, leaning against a wall with his arms crossed. He wasn't particularly interested in listening to this spiel again, so he spent most of his time talking with Kyuubi. "So just how strong is the Shodai anyways? You should know, right? Since you fought him and all." Kyuubi let out a small chuckle. "Let me put to you this way. As everything stands right now, Hashirama could destroy you and the entire village of Konoha with little more than a thought. The shinobi of this era are incredibly weak when compared to those of the last 2 generations. Even your beloved 4th Hokage would have been nothing more than a fly compared to Hashirama." "Yes," Toki still in her disguise as Sagi said. "I was hoping that by disguising myself as the cursed warrior, I could discover who was behind the death of my father and brother." Her eyes narrowed. "Instead I was used as a pawn by Moso. I am truly sorry for the trouble I have caused you." "It is fine," Chome waved the apology off. There really was nothing to be sorry for, especially when he had not made an attempt at facilitating communications between him and the young daimyo either. "It is I who should be apologizing. Perhaps if I had caught onto his plans sooner, none of this would have happened." "Was the Shodai really that strong?" "He was beyond strong. Your Shodai Hokage was the strongest shinobi of his time, and I know, I fought most of those shinobi at one point or another. While many of the stronger ninja managed to survive against me, they only did so because they were not alone. Hashirama fought against me and survived on his own. Sure, he was half dead before he escaped, but considering he had underestimated me and not used his Mokuden ninjutsu, that's saying something." "What about the Tem's ancestor? That Madara guy?" Kyuubi hissed angrily at that name. "Do not ask me about that man ever again. What happened between Madara and I is something that shall never reach the light of day." Alright. Yeesh, no need to get so angry. A simple, "I don't want to tell you," would have done it. Don't expect me to apologize. I've done enough of that with you already." Naruto rolled his eyes. "Don't worry, I don't." "What do you plan to do now, Sagi-sama?" asked Chome. "What do I plan to do now?" Toki repeated the question with a hint of sarcasm. I plan on making Moso pay for everything he's done. She stood up, her fists clenched. I'm going to kill him and avenge my father and brother. And I suppose you're going to do this all by yourself. Naruto spoke outside of his mind for the first time since Toki started explaining everything to Chome. That's what you're going to do, isn't it? You're just going to go off and try and kill Moso on your own, without even asking for our help. Naruto, you've done a good job with everything so far, and have helped me out, and I am grateful. Toki narrowed her eyes. However, I do not need, nor want your help for this. Moso will die by my hands and no one else's. There was a very prominent frown on Naruto's face as he stared Toki down. The young woman tried to give him a defiant glare, but after several seconds she looked off to the side, unable to maintain it in the face of his steadfast expression. I see, the blonde said quietly. So revenge is more important to you than your country. The country your father and brother gave their lives for. You're just going to throw everything away so you can kill this guy with your own two hands, all for the sake of your petty revenge. You don't understand anything, Toki shouted, teeth grit and fists clenched so tightly they were shaking. I have to do this. I need to kill Moso. If I don't, time will never start flowing again. She yanked the watch he had seen her holding out from where it had been hidden within her sleeves. You see this watch? This watch was passed down from father to son for generations, but no more. This watch is broken. Its time has stopped just as mine has, and until I've settled this with my own two hands, my heart will remain as broken as this watch. The intense stare down between Naruto and Toki lasted for only a few seconds. Yet, for some reason, those seconds seemed to stretch on for hours. In the background now, Chome observed the pair with indecisiveness. I see, Naruto closed his eyes. You really are lost, aren't you? He chuckled bitterly while Toki bristled. Then go ahead and do what you want. If you want to throw away your life for the sake of something as stupid as revenge, I won't stop you. Toki bristled at Naruto's blatant disregard for her need for revenge. He knew nothing about how she felt. She needed this. More than anything else, she needed that final release that would only come from completing her vengeance on the one who wronged her. Why couldn't he understand that? Why did she care about what he thought of her so much? Taking a few deep breaths, she forced herself to calm down. Her fists unclenched, and her posture relaxed. That's right, she shouldn't care about what he thought. She didn't. Naruto's opinions didn't matter to her. All that mattered was killing Moso and avenging her father and brother. Anything else was superfluous at best, and unimportant at worst. Toki prepared to leave the room so she could get dressed and head out. She had to kill someone after all. You can't be serious. Chome finally spoke up, having recovered from his shock at seeing the blonde Konoha shinobi arguing with his daimyo. I know you are hurting right now, Sagi-sama, but revenge is not the way. It will only lead to more pain and suffering. I don't care, Toki said harshly. So long as I attain my revenge, nothing else matters. I would gladly suffer 1,000 years if it meant I could claim vengeance over the one who wronged me. Naruto closed his eyes. This woman reminded him so much of Sasuke, the boy that had lost himself to darkness and willingly given himself over to an S-rank traitor. She was willing to do anything if it would allow her a shot at revenge. He didn't want to see someone take the path Sasuke took. While he would not really consider himself or Sasuke to be all that close, he had still been a comrade and someone he saw as a rival for a good portion of their time together. And as much as he didn't want to admit it, it had hurt when Sasuke left the village. Naruto didn't want to witness that happening to someone else. But what could he do? What you always do. Kyuubi. When Kyuubi didn't respond to his words, the blonde frowned. Do what you always do. What he always did. A smirk made its way to his face. XOX. Are you sure that was wise? Chome asked with a frown as he looked at the door Toki left through. His eyes darted back to Naruto to see him standing by the bedside where Chishima was sleeping, looking down at the person who was probably Toki's most loyal supporter. Letting Sagi-sama leave like that. You know as well as I do that Moso is likely far more dangerous than he realizes. Sagi-sama may very well be moving into a trap. Of that there can be no doubt. Naruto looked away from Chishima to eye his compatriot for the moment. I would be honestly surprised if Moso didn't know that Sagi is the cursed warrior. He shook his head at using Toki's brother's name. He should probably tell Chome the truth about her, however, it wasn't his information to tell. Chances are he's prepared a reception for your daimyo and is just waiting for Sagi to make an appearance. If you knew it was dangerous, knew that Sagi-sama was being led into a trap, then why did you let him leave? Chome looked about ready to rip his nearly non-existent hair out. Seriously, couldn't this boy have tried a little harder to keep Sagi-sama from leaving? If I had done that, all it would have done is make Sagi even more bitter. Naruto closed his eyes, thinking about another person who had lost themselves to vengeance. He often wondered what would have happened had he caught up to Sasuke that day. If he had stopped the Uchiha heir from leaving, would Sasuke have been grateful? Or would he have become even more bitter and resentful towards others? It was a question Naruto would never find an answer for. Opening his eyes less than a second later, the blonde fixed Chome with a look. Right now your daimyo is in a bad place, and unless he gets some sense knocked into him, he's likely not going to be leaving that place anytime soon. Naruto broke out into a grin. Besides, who says I just let him go? It only took a few seconds for Chome to understand the context of that sentence. When he did, his eyes widened. You mean? That's right, Naruto's eyes closed as the grin etched on his lips stretched across his face, making the whiskers stretch along with it. He truly looked like some kind of kitsune right then. I'm just a Kage Bunshin. The real Naruto has been trailing Sagi since he left. XOX. The darkness of the night was only barely offset by the light provided by the moon and stars. A velvety layer of black had surrounded the land of Tori no Kuni. Everything was covered in darkness, masking the kites Toki was using to sail through the air well. Once more dressed in the garb of the cursed warrior, Toki prepared for her final showdown with Moso. No matter what happened from here on out, nothing mattered except for her revenge. The place she was heading towards was very easy to spot. She could see the building where Moso resided. It was marked by the fire from several torches, which crackled and wavered gently in the cool night air. Moso himself was standing on the veranda. So he was waiting for her to arrive. That was fine. It would make things easier for Toki now that she didn't have to search for him. At least, those were Toki's thoughts until a fireball shot out of Moso's mouth, illuminating the entire area and showing the man she had come to kill how she was managing to stay aloft. What? This was followed by Moso going through a set of hand seals that she could not see due to the illumination from the receding fireball, which was just as quickly followed by a stream of fire that was launched from Moso's mouth again, this time hitting her kite and reducing it to ashes. With her kite no longer able to keep her afloat kind of hard when it's been burnt to cinders, Toki began to fall. Her feet managed to find purchase on a tree branch, but it was unable to support the combined weight of her and the armor she was wearing, thus it snapped under her and she fell to the ground. Thankfully, she was able to land on her feet. Or mostly her feet. She was forced to kneel on one knee due to how far she had fallen in order to absorb the impact. At least she was alive. Not so thankfully, her Oni mask was beginning to get unbearably hot, which she soon realized was due to it being on fire. Moving with frantic haste, she yanked the mask off and cast it to the side, showing her face. Hey. Moso chuckled lowly at the sight of Toki as she knelt there on the ground. So he found this amusing, did he? She would ensure he wouldn't find it so amusing after gutting him with her naginata. I bid you welcome, cursed warrior. Make your move, Moso. Toki scowled at the man as he stood there, cool as a cucumber. I will give you reason enough to fear me. Save your breath, it's among the last you shall take. Fitting epitaph. With a shout that seemed to unleash all of her anger and hatred for this man, Toki lunged forward with her naginata, wanting nothing more than to see this man impaled on the long pole weapon's blade. It wasn't going to happen. With surprising quickness, agility and strength, Moso jumped up over the blade meant to stab him in the chest. Then, with surprising lightness of feet, he landed on the blade itself. Another surprise was that even though he was standing on the blade, Toki was able to hold it up just as easily as if he were not standing on it, like he wasn't even there, or as light as a feather. You thought it would be easy, didn't you? Moso smiled a mocking smile at Toki. I'm almost disappointed that you would think so. But then, I suppose I shouldn't have expected anything less from someone who I had so unwittingly duped for all these years. Pushing his feet off the blade, Moso jumped backwards into the air, his body flipping over like some kind of acrobat before he landed on his feet several meters away. He looked as unruffled as ever. "Allow me to formally introduce myself." He gave a mocking bow. "My name is Hokei, and I am the leader of the Wandering Ninja." Wandering Ninja? Toki's eyes widened. Hadn't she heard Naruto talking about the Wandering Ninja? She hadn't quite believed him then, but now the evidence was irrefutable. It was staring her right in the face. "With no land to call our own, we drift from place to place, flotsam on the waves, stealing the jutsu nobody will deign to teach us. But the years sit heavy on our shoulders. Our patchwork clan tires of this vagrant existence." Hokei, as he was now calling himself, looked up at the sky as if in contemplation. "That's why we've been looking for a place to end our wandering and set down roots." And suddenly, Toki understood. She understood everything that had happened to her up to this point. It was all because of this man, for this reason. So the truth has finally come out. You've been planning to take over this country from the very moment you arrived here. How dare you judge our motives, you spoiled brat. Fortune has favored you. We wandering ninja suffer in a way you could never begin to understand. Toki tensed as Hokei opened his normally closed eyes to look at her. "I see no harm in unfortunates like us wanting a place we can call home. But we could have never come this far had it not been for your father." Toki's hands gripped her naginata tightly at the mention of her father. "I assumed the guise of Moso and charmed my way into Iwashi-sama's confidences. All the while the fool never suspected a thing. A dramatic bit of genjutsu was enough to convince him of Moso's magical prowess, thus he brought me into the fold as a trusted advisor. Chom alone had enough sense to harbor suspicions about what I was up to. So I painted Chom as a malcontent, after killing your father. That was you. Somehow, suspecting something and after that same something confirmed were two very different things. The knowledge that this man had indeed murdered her father was shocking, even though a part of her had already come to suspect that it was he who killed her father. You're the one who murdered my father. I killed him with pleasure. And after I kill you tonight, no one will stand in our way." That was enough. She had heard enough. This man had to die. Your evil ends here. Toki's body shifted. Her left foot moved backwards to give her more support as she lifted the hand holding her naginata behind her back as if it were a javelin. The muscles in her arms and back tensed like a coiled spring waiting to be unloaded. The dead cry out for vengeance. With a quick motion, she unleashed the naginata, sending it flying towards Hokei. Her aim was true. The weapon soared through the air, traveling straight towards her most hated enemy. It was set to impale him through the heart. It would have too, had Hokei not moved. A quick step back followed by an upward swing of the fan in his right hand deflected the long weapon, not only launching it off course but sending it spinning end over end towards Toki. A gasp escaped her lips as Toki tried to move back in order to avoid the weapon that was now coming towards her. While she was able to avoid getting injured, her surprise was such that she did not move quickly enough to avoid the naginata entirely. The blade of her naginata hit her helmet, knocking it off her face and sending her long hair spilling over her face. It was the first time since she had known the man that Moso, Hokei she corrected, looked surprised. Well and truly shocked. Can it be? Yes, she said, her left hand gripping the sheath of her katana while her right grabbed a hold of the hilt. Sagi's younger sister, Toki. With practiced movements, she unsheathed her katana and held it in a second stance. The sword was being held vertically up and down, with her elbows jutting out. Her body was more or less straight, save for the slight slouching of her upper back, a sign that she was not as well versed in kendo as she was the naginata. This is for my father and brother. Wanting nothing more than to put this man down and end this, Toki charged straight at Hokei. Kujime no Jutsu, Shadow Possession Jutsu. Too bad she forgot she was dealing with a ninja, a wandering ninja at that, and not a samurai. After going through a set of hand seals and calling out the name of his jutsu, Toki found herself suddenly incapable of moving. Her eyes widened as she struggled, her muscles tensing under the strain as she tried to move. Yet no matter how much effort she put into it, her body refused to budge an inch. Well, Toki, Hokei said chidingly as he held his hand in a rat seal. Observe how our shadows intersect. That is the Kujime no Jutsu, and you are now mine to command. As if to prove his words were true, Hokei moved his left hand to the side. Toki's right followed his movements. Impressive, I never imagined you were alive. He seemed to find amusement in Toki's struggles. Such thoughts probably would have pissed her off at any other point, but at that moment all she felt was fear as she realized her life was now in the palm of this man's hand. Which really just meant she wasn't going to live for much longer. The wandering ninja will control this land, never to wander again. Hokei moved his fan-gripped hand back towards his throat, forcing Toki to rest the edge of her blade along her own throat. And you who lived as Sagi will now die like him. Toki struggled as much as she could against her body's betrayal. Her arm tensed as she did everything in her power to keep her own blade from slicing through her neck, but no matter how hard she tried, it seemed that whatever strange power Hokei had over her body was winning. With each passing second she found the blade getting closer and closer to her throat. About time you finished your monologue, Moso. Or is it Hokei? Well, whatever, it's not like it matters. What does matter is that I'm here to stomp a mud hole in your ass. Toki's eyes widened. She knew that voice. Naruto. Naruto. Hokei blinked. Wasn't Naruto that blonde brat who had left early this morning? So you're still here. I should have known. You Konoha scum are always sticking your nose in where it doesn't belong. Well, you're too late. Now that Toki is under the control of my shadow, there is nothing you can do to stop me from slitting her throat. Who the hell do you take me for? I've worked with Inara before, and I know for a fact that cheap imitation of yours is nothing like the real shadow possession technique. As Naruto said this, a swift breeze picked up behind Toki. As one, the many wires that had been hidden under a minor genjutsu were cut, allowing Toki to fall to her knees. Naruto then chose that moment to make his grand appearance, literally phasing into existence to stand protectively in front of Toki with minor application of the shunshin. Should he have just gone and killed Hokei and ended this charade? Probably. But this was Naruto we're talking about. Naruto. Naruto took his eyes off Hokei. He had shadow clones hidden around the area watching the man in case he tried to pull any funny business to look at Toki. He offered her a quick grin. Sorry it took so long. That idiot over there was ranting so much that I just couldn't find the proper moment to step in and rescue you. And just like that, any happiness Toki might have felt at Naruto appearing just in time to save the day died a horrible, horrible death. You mean to tell me that you could have stepped in at any time but waited? She asked, deadpan. Of course. Naruto crossed his arms over his chest and gave her a slightly amused look. Don't you know that the hero is always supposed to appear at the last moment? It makes for a much more dramatic entrance. Toki didn't know whether to laugh or to curse the blonde for being so him while they were in the middle of a crisis situation with the fate of her country and her own vengeance on the line. Only you, Naruto, she sighed, before smiling a bit. Toki wasn't sure why, but there was no way she could stay mad at him for this. Maybe it had something to do with him saving her. Don't think you can just ignore me. Hokei suddenly made himself known again, going through a series of hand seals before ending on the tiger seal. Kaiten. Gokyaku no Jutsu, fire release, fireball jutsu. Opening his mouth, Hokei released a fireball from within the depths of his throat and sent it straight towards Naruto. Naruto. Well, he snorted. Was this guy serious? That fireball was pathetic. Sasuke's was at least 5 times larger than this guy's. Making a decision on what to do, Naruto reached into his kunai pouch and whipped out a scroll. Unrolling it in mid-air revealed a complex sealing array, a complex series of kanji running down the scroll in several rows lengthwise while a circle of kanji with arrows pointing towards the center was in the middle. Placing the scroll on the ground, Naruto ran through a small gauntlet of hand seals, then slammed his hands on either side of the scroll. Fuka Hoin, sealing art, fire sealing method. The fireball that had been traveling towards him far more slowly than most fireball jutsu would if they were launched from someone more competent began to stretch. Its body elongated and moved towards the scroll, where it soon became sucked into the paper. As the flames disappeared within the seal, the red kanji for fire appeared within the circle while blue vapor from excess chakra rose from the parchment. Fuinjutsu. Hokei looked surprised to see that someone like Naruto knew the art of sealing. Well, it was an incredibly complex art requiring knowledge of complicated sealing formulas. I had not realized I was dealing with an adept at sealing. Still, this changes nothing. Kuchio's no jutsu, summoning jutsu. Naruto blinked several times as two very large and very realistic-looking dragons with scaly green skin and glowing yellow eyes appeared before him. The dragons roared as they glared down at him and Toki like the two were their next meal. There was only one problem. "Ah, are you serious?" Naruto complained as he looked from the dragons to Hokei. "You didn't use anywhere near enough chakra to summon something like that." He then blinked. "And as far as I know there is no such thing as a dragon summoning contract. If there was, it would be pretty damn famous. Think whatever you like. Finish him, my pets." "Yep." Naruto nodded sagely. "Definitely not real. No summon would allow themselves to be called a pet." He thought about his own summons, the toads, and how damn mouthy they were. Boss Gamma was particularly belligerent. It was probably why they got along so well. And Manda was just as bad with his, "I demand human sacrifices before I would ever fight for you," spiel that he had going on. Even Katsuya, the most mild-mannered boss summon he knew, demanded respect. There was just no way these summons could be real. Which meant, spinning about on his heel, Naruto lashed out with a wind blade at a small light that he could see hiding on a tree. The blade flew true, slicing into the holographic projector like a hot knife through butter, or a wind jutsu through paper. The mechanical device didn't stand a chance. With the destruction of the holographic projector, Hokei seemed to realize he was outclassed. He grit his teeth, trying to find a way out, but when one did not present itself, it became obvious he would have to take things into his own hands. Putting a hand to his mouth, a whistle escaped from Hokei, signaling the several ninja that had been hiding out in case things got rough. He had not thought he would have to use them, but now that he was Hokei was glad he had the foresight to position them around his residence. No one came. "What the? I hope you weren't expecting those ninja you had hiding around to come to your rescue," Naruto said, smirking that damnable smirk. Hokei realized what was happening before it happened. One by one several clones of the blonde came out of the woodworks, each one carrying one of his men under them like a sack of potatoes. "You didn't honestly think I would leave things to chance, did you?" Naruto may not be the brightest shinobi around, and he may act like an idiot half the time, but he wasn't stupid. When the time came to lay down the gauntlet and plan out his moves, the blonde Uzumaki could make strategies with the best of them. He wouldn't be so damn good at pranking if he wasn't. "You." Hokei glared at the blonde with insanity and hatred in his eyes. "You damn brat. You've ruined everything." "Oops, my bad." Naruto scratched the back of his head and grinned. "Sorry about that. I hope you don't have any hard feelings or anything. I'm just doing my job." Hokei's eye began twitching. He ruined everything. There was no way he could take over the country now. He couldn't even use Toki as a hostage because Naruto was blocking his way, and he was not stupid enough to get in close to the person who just countered all of his jutsu so easily. "Do you really think you have me beat?" he yelled. "This is far from finished. I may not be able to get my hands on Tori no Kuni anymore, but don't think this is the last you will hear from me. One day, I'll find a place of my own, and then I'll have my revenge." No you won't," Naruto said, and then pointed at something behind Hokei. Like an idiot, Hokei turned around, only to be knocked unconscious when a Naruto clone decked him in the face. Toki blinked as she watched Hokei crumble to the ground like a house of cards. It had been so easy for Naruto to deal with him. Compared to her, it was like Hokei was nothing to him, nothing but a speck on the wall. Was this the strength of a Konoha shinobi? As Naruto watched his clone removing what looked like some kind of large costume from Hokei, he turned to look at Toki. "You alright, Haim?" he asked. I'm fine," Toki breathed out. She blinked at the hand Naruto offered to her, before taking it and allowing him to help her stand. Looking up, it was only now that they were standing so close that Toki realized just how much taller he was than her. "Thank you, for your help. I would have been killed if you had not shown up." "Why did that sound so hard for you to say?" Toki flushed a bit at the question while Naruto chuckled. "Well, it's cool. I'm glad to have helped out." Oyabun. Two heads turned to see the Naruto clone that had knocked Hokei on his ass dragging the unconscious man towards them. He dropped the wandering ninja like a bag of rocks in front of them, and Naruto and Toki got their first glimpse of the real Hokei. "Wow," Naruto whistled. "I always thought he looked like a clown before, but now he really looks like a clown. Is that makeup he's wearing? He and Kankuro would probably get along famously." Somewhere in Sunagaku, a certain cat pajama-wearing ninja shook his fist in the air and shouted, "It's not makeup. It's war paint," much to the confusion of Gaara and Temari. "So what do you want to do with him?" asked Naruto, turning to Toki who was looking down at the man. She looked up at him when he spoke, "Oh. This is your country that he wronged. As daimyo, you get to decide his punishment." That's right. It was her job to punish him for betraying her country. This was her chance for revenge. The chance she had sought for so long. Hokei was now helpless before her. She could kill him and he wouldn't be able to do a thing. She gripped her katana so tightly that her hand began shaking. Raising her blade above her head and holding it in a two-handed grip, she prepared to bring it down on Hokei, killing him and achieving her revenge. Out of the corner of her eyes, she caught sight of Naruto, who was looking at her in disappointment. She paused at the look, feeling a small pit of unease in the pit of her stomach. For some reason, Toki did not want that look pointed at her. She looked back down at Hokei, still unconscious, still helpless, then turned her gaze back to Naruto. He was eyeing her with a carefully masked gaze now. She could determine nothing from his face, though his eyes had now gone from disappointed to curious. Taking a deep breath, Toki closed her eyes. Then brought the blade back down to her side. He will stand trial in front of a tribunal and receive punishment befitting his crime, she determined, which meant he would still probably be killed, but it wouldn't be by her hand. Killing a daimyo and betraying a country is serious business. Naruto put a hand on her shoulder, and Toki shuddered at the warmth that seemed to exude from the simple gesture. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's get you back home. My clones can take care of this trash." Toki smiled as she reached up and placed her hand over his larger one. She was very glad that it was so dark so Naruto could not see her blush. Too bad she didn't know Naruto could see in the dark just as easily as he could the light. "Thank you, Naruto." No problem." They began the walk back towards their residence, Naruto with his hands up behind his head in a look of casualness that was only added to by his grin, and Toki with the poise and elegance of a daimyo, albeit one who had just been on the receiving end of a minor beating. "Besides, you still have to explain to Chom and Chishima why you decided to disguise yourself as your brother." Toki's eyes widened. "Oh crap. XOX. Naruto groggily opened his eyes as something disturbed his sleep. He blinked several times, trying to get the gunk and crust out of them without having to use his hands. It would have been too troublesome to actually lift any part of his body right now. Damn, he felt like Shikamaru. It had only been a few hours ago that he and Toki returned to her palace. After she had explained to Chom and Chishima how she had disguised herself as Sagi, which had been very amusing, she had offered Naruto a place to stay until it came time for him to leave. She had even managed to wrangle a promise from him that he would stay until her official coronation as daimyo of Tori no Kuni. The bed Naruto was in was very comfortable, more so than anything else he had ever slept in, especially his own bed, which explained why he had fallen asleep so easily and so deeply. Royalty sure knew how to live it up. That did beg the question of just what had awoken him. While Naruto could be a light sleeper when he wanted to be, when not required, he could easily sleep like the dead. Blinking several more times, Naruto finally saw the cause of his awakening. "I had better be dreaming because if you're real, then I'm going to scream." Floating above him, his form ethereal and transparent, was none other than Sagi. Or the ghost of Sagi, but Naruto really hoped it wasn't a ghost and that this was just a dream. "I wanted to thank you for rescuing my sister from herself," Sagi smiled at him. A ghostly smile. How creepy. "I entrusted her with the future of Tori no Kuni by giving her my watch," but Toki became obsessed with her intense desire for revenge. For her heart, it was as if time had stopped, and as a mere soul, I was not able to change it. "But you did what I could not. You restarted her time, pushing her forward into the present. I cannot thank you enough for what you have done." You can thank me by letting me sleep in peace." Naruto rolled over and tried to ignore the creepy ghost floating above him. "It was just a dream, just a dream. It was just a dream. Come on, Naruto. Keep on saying it and maybe it will become true." "Very well. Farewell, Naruto, and thank you." "Whatever." As the strange pressure from the ghostly apparition left him, Naruto decided to just pretend this whole thing had never happened. Maybe now he could get back to sleep. The sliding of his shoji screen doors disabused him of that notion. Naruto. Are you awake? Aang. Naruto groaned as he rolled back over onto his back and looked over to see who had disturbed him this time. Damn these interruptions. Couldn't they see he wanted to sleep? Well, at least it wasn't a ghost. Toki. Naruto pushed himself into a sitting position as he looked at the woman slowly walking further into his room. What are you, he yawned, doing here so late at night? Is something wrong? No, Toki smiled as she sat down on the bed, causing the mattress to shift to accommodate her slight weight. Nothing is wrong. I just never got the chance to thank you for all you've done for me. Naruto scratched the back of his head, confusion evident on her face. I'm pretty sure you did thank me, didn't you? Right after I knocked Hokei on his ass. Maybe, but I wanted to thank you properly. Properly? What do you? Naruto could not say any more, for his mouth was hampered by another mouth. His eyes widened as Toki kissed him. He opened his mouth, whether to protest her actions or for some other reason would never be knowing, mainly because Toki used that opportunity to slip her tongue inside his oral cavity. The blonde was quickly pushed back down onto the bed, Toki straddling as her kiss turned feverish. Her hands slipped under his shirt and began messaging his muscled pectorals and washboard stomach in greater and greater sweeps. Her actions sent a chill down Naruto's spine. Perhaps it was because his higher functions had shut down, or maybe it had something to do with the incredible taste of her lips, but Naruto soon began returning the kiss with equal passion. Their tongues danced and dueled. Naruto's hands gripped Toki's lithe waist and pulled her to him. The above him moaned at his actions and began kissing him even harder. And then she began grinding herself against him. Naruto's brain rebooted. With a gasp of shock, Naruto pushed Toki's lips off him, then quickly slipped out from underneath her. He scrambled off the bed, his bare feet touching the cool tatami flooring as he tried to regain his breathing. Naruto. Toki looked at him in concern and a little bit of hurt. What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? Naruto shouted, causing Toki to flinch. What we were just doing it's wrong. You can't. Naruto's mind was a whirlwind of emotion and turmoil. He had flirted with girls before, Tenten and Temari being the two who received the most of his time. But even then, it had only been light flirting between friends. Nothing more, nothing less. He had never done anything like this before, he couldn't. I'm sorry. Naruto quickly turned around and dashed out of the door, heedless of the fact that he was wearing nothing but a pair of orange boxers. Wait, Naruto. Naruto ran down corridor after corridor until he managed to slip through one of the secret passages that led outside. Once there, he found a tree to place his hand against as he tried to regain his breath. Naruto. Don't. Naruto's voice sounded out in warning. Please don't say anything, Kyuubi. I want to be alone right now. Kyuubi remained silent after that, leaving Naruto to face the inner turmoil of his feelings alone. XOX. I gotta admit, brat, I'm pretty impressed that you managed to solve this little problem on your own, Jiraiya said as he and Naruto stood a few meters from the crowd that had gathered for the official coronation of Toki. It looked like the entirety of the country had come to see Toki become the official daimyo. Naruto could not even begin to count the number of people that were there, standing just outside of the veranda where Toki would make her appearance. Usually, only Jonin can do solo missions, even if this one wasn't as dangerous as some. Yeah, well, what can I say, Naruto said with a small grin. I'm just awesome like that. HMPH, don't get too cocky brat. You've got a long way to go before you can begin taking on solo A-rank missions like a Jonin can. Whatever. Look alive brat, it's starting. Naruto looked over just as the sound of a drum began beating. The door to the chamber where Toki was waiting opened, revealing the woman in all her splendor. Toki had taken to wearing a very elaborate kimono made from several layers. The kimono was a solid pink, and was being held up by a very ornate blue obi with gold edgings. Underneath the kimono were several layers of clothing in blue, gold, green and white in that order. Over her kimono she was wearing a white susokiri with red lining the inner edge and gold lining the sleeves. On top of her head was a beautifully crafted gold crown that, while small and seemingly not as grand as, say, the Fire Daimyo's crown, was impressive in its own right. Naruto could not help but think she looked magnificent in her ceremonial dress. A blush spread across Jiraiya's face as he caught sight of the beautiful woman before him. He then began to drool. If I had known what a babe Toki was, I would have come around much sooner, oof. Jiraiya winced and held his stomach. Damn it, brat, what was that for? Naruto removed his elbow from where it had hit Jiraiya in the gut, not even bothering to take his eyes off Toki. Perv on her even from a distance and I will castrate you with a rusty spork. Ah, you're no fun. When Naruto raised his elbow again, Jiraiya backed off and held his hands up in a gesture of surrender. Alright, I won't admire such a fine example of feminine beauty, but only because my cute little apprentice doesn't want me staring at his crush. From across the field, Naruto's and Toki's eyes met. Unable to hold her gaze, Naruto looked away and turned a glare on Jiraiya. I don't have a crush on her, he snapped, perhaps a little more harshly than he should. It's called having some decency. You don't perv on a daimyo, Ero Sennin. Fine, whatever you say, kid. Jiraiya hiked up the large scroll he was carrying around and turned to leave. Come on, we should head out soon. I want to get out of here before nightfall. Naruto sighed, sparing one last look at Toki, before spinning on his heels to follow Jiraiya. After walking for several minutes in silence, Jiraiya sighed, sounding resigned as he turned his head to look at Naruto. Hey brat, what do you want, perv? A tick mark formed on Jiraiya's head, but he ignored the insult. What he had to say was important. I needed to tell you something, he hesitated, causing Naruto to look at him. It's about your family. Chapter 42, Growing Pains. Naruto frowned as he walked through the barren wasteland. Squinting his eyes as the sun bore down on him, he tried to use his enhanced eyesight to see if he could discern whether or not there was anything living within this Kami-forsaken place. There was nothing. Nothing except for the heat waves distorting the air around him. This place. Naruto murmured to himself in discontent. Even wearing nothing more than a pair of white shorts and an equally white skin-tight sleeveless shirt did nothing to quell the heat threatening to bake him like an overcooked turkey. His clothing was liberally caked to his skin as sweat drenched his body only to dry up and leave that disgusting, sticky afterfeel. Is this really the rendezvous point where we're supposed to meet our client? Who the hell meets in a place that's so fucking hot? You know, watching you suffer out there almost makes me glad I'm in here where it's always nice and cool. It almost makes being sealed worth it. Naruto scowled at the sound of Kyuubi's voice. Ah, sure, rub it and why don't you? That's right brat, Jiraiya answered as he saddled up to the blonde, one hand on his hip and the other shielding his eyes like a visor. Naruto scowled. The Prince of Tsuki no Kuni, Land of the Moon, and his caravan should be coming this way. Our job is to meet up with them and protect the prince on his journey back to his country. You'll want to keep a sharp eye out. I don't think I need to tell you how important this client is. I wasn't talking to you, Jiraiya. Naruto snarled at the man, the anger and loathing in his voice earning a wince from his sensei. Ah, come on, Naruto. Are you still upset about before? Upset. Naruto grit his teeth, his larger-than-average canines baring themselves angrily at the man. For a moment, his pupils became slitted, before reverting back to their normal round look. How could I possibly be upset? I mean, I only learned that my own fucking father sealed the Kyuubi into me and that the man who should have raised me decided his time would be better spent whoring himself out and perving on women in hot springs so he could write those filthy novels. Jiraiya grimaced. I already said I was sorry. Sorry doesn't take away the pain from 13 years of neglect. Naruto bellowed so loudly the noise echoed across the vast wasteland. It doesn't change the fact that my own godfather, the person who was supposed to take care of me if something ever happened to my parents, ignored me for 13 years of my life and is only now trying to work his way in. You think you can just come into my life after ignoring me for 13 years? Think again, Jiraiya. With each word that escaped Naruto's mouth, the wound Jiraiya felt opening as he realized how badly he had inadvertently hurt his godson became deeper. He knew the boy would be angry at him when he revealed their relationship. It was only natural that the child would be angry, especially when his past was taken into consideration. What the Gamma Sennin had not expected was just how angry Naruto would be. Even after 2 months the boy refused to even speak with him except when they were training. And even then, Naruto would speak only enough to get his point across, then he would continue to ignore Jiraiya as if he didn't exist. This was actually the most he had even heard the boy speak in one sitting since he had revealed Naruto's heritage to him. Naruto turned around so that he would be facing away from Jiraiya. Just looking at him filled him with so much anger it was taking all he had not to rake his claws down the man's face. I will accept you as my teacher, because I know I'm not strong enough to look out for myself or defeat a single S-class ninja much less 9, but that's all you are to me now. I refuse to accept you as my godfather. As Naruto began marching again, Jiraiya sighed. He did not regret telling his godson of his heritage, because really, the boy deserved to know who his parents were. It was just as he told Tsunade, the boy had a right to know. That did not mean having the boy he should have raised since his parents' death ignore him like he didn't exist did not hurt. It did. A lot. Unfortunately, there was not much he could do about Naruto's anger towards him right now. All he could do was complete this mission to the best of his abilities and hope the boy's anger cooled down soon. Don't you think you're being a tad harsh? Don't tell me you're taking his side, Kyuubi. You know I'm not. I was just stating that you are being quite harsh and that it's unlike you. And don't take that tone with me. I am not the one who ignored you for 13 years. No, you're just the reason my parents died, Naruto said snidely. Almost as soon as he spoke those words he came to regret them. Kyuubi, do you think I wanted to kill your parents, Naruto? News flash, I couldn't have cared less if they had lived or died. Had they just let me go, I would have simply left that Kami-forsaken village and never looked back. I simply wanted my freedom, but your parents refused to give me that. Your mother had to be an idiot and held me down with her blasted chains while your gods be damned father sealed me into you when all I wanted was to be free. Look, Naruto sighed tiredly. I didn't meant that. He paused, then blinked. Hold on, how did you know who my mother was? Jiraiya only mentioned her in passing. Ellipsis. Kyuubi. When only silence greeted him, Naruto sighed. Great, and now I've just pissed off the one person I can talk to in this fucking wasteland. Smooth Naruto, real smooth. XOX. What the fuck? Naruto had seen a lot of things in his short life, many of which would cause any civilian and even some ninja to shiver in fear, or lose their lunch. He had traveled to a number of different countries and had seen villages both small and large. From the tiny community at Nami no Kuni where everybody knew everyone else to the great city in Tetsu no Kuni, Naruto could honestly say he had seen things that few ninja could lay claim to. In all that time, Naruto would freely admit that he had never seen a caravan that was so damn big. Stretching out for what looked like miles were dozens, perhaps even hundreds of wagons that looked like they were bursting at the seams with junk. Dozens of paraphernalia that looked like they had come from all over the world filled the wagons. Naruto couldn't even name half the crap that was stuffed in them. Who the hell buys so much stuff? I did. Naruto turned as the wagons all ground to a halt to see a man trying to squirm his way out of the most extravagant-looking wagon of them all. Trying, being the keyword. Naruto gaped as the man who looked like he was fat enough to eat at least 2 okomakis for breakfast and still have room left over for dessert squirmed and wiggled his way out of the carriage. The man in question had brown hair that was being covered by a red cap, brown eyes, and was wearing an extravagant blue kimono with darker blue accents and blue and white triangles on the bottom. Underneath that were a pair of khaki pants, and thrown over the whole ensemble was some kind of tassel with the same blue and white triangle patterns in it and a golden crescent moon at the end. In short, the man looked like one of those fat fucks who did nothing but sit around eating all day and spending money like it was going out of style. The porpoise, for this fat creature could not possibly be a man, continued speaking as he managed to finally get out of the carriage and walk over to Naruto and Jiraiya. I saw so many incredible things in all the lands we visited that I just had to have them. So I just kept buying, and before I knew it, I ended up with all this. Naruto grimaced. I see, so this guy really was one of those fat, lazy members of royalty who spent money without a care in the world. Naruto would bet all the money in his Gama-chan and then some that this guy had probably never had to work a day in his life. It wasn't much of a surprise, but Naruto really hated people like this. Rich, arrogant fools who had so much money they could spend $1 million a day and not run out in their lifetime. These people knew nothing of hardship, of sacrifice. They didn't know it was like saving every scrap of money you had so that you could afford decent clothes and food that was not spoiled. People like this fat prince had everything they could ever want handed to them on platters of gold and silver their whole life. At least Sasuke worked for his title of Rookie of the Year. Whatever Naruto's feelings for Sasuke were and had been did not change the fact that Sasuke had trained hard to acquire the talent he had. Maybe not Rock Lee hard, but then, who the hell trains that hard besides Rock Lee and his crazy-ass sensei? No one, that's who. I am Michiru. The porpoise now known as Michiru placed his hands on his hips as he looked at Naruto and Jiraiya with an interested expression. Kami, even his voice had that soft, spoiled prince, ring to it. The prince of Tasuki no Kuni. And I take it that you two are my shinobi escorts. That's right, Jiraiya stepped forward. Naruto turned his head to look away from the pair. He had no interest in what they said. I'm Jiraiya and this is Uzumaki Naruto of Konohagakure no Sato. We're both here to see you back home safely. Michiru looked at Naruto again, and the blonde boy felt violated when the fat fuck eyed his arms. He knew they were pretty ripped for someone so young, but come on, there was no need to stare at them like that. Well, you guys certainly look powerful. I can tell that I'm in good hands. Haha. Jiraiya laughed boisterously, his hands on his hips and his head tilted slightly towards the sky. Naruto rolled his eyes. That is correct. You are in good hands. Tsunade knows how important your country is, which is why she sent me and the brat here to escort you. We are currently some of the strongest shinobi Konoha has to offer. Is that so? Excellent. Please be sure to look after me and my son on our way home. Jiraiya's boisterous laugh once more filled the air. Don't worry about a thing, Michiru Dono. The brat and I can handle anything that gets thrown at us. Naruto grit his teeth as the man called him brat again. Who the hell did this perverted fool think he was? Talking about him as if they were family or something. This idiot didn't have the right to speak of him so familiarly. Instincts suddenly blared to life and Naruto's eyes snapped wide open. At the same time, his hand shot out and snatched the small projectile that had been aimed at his head out of the air. He brought the weapon down to get a better look at it, and saw that it was a fake arrow with a suction cup replacing the point. A child's projectile. You know, it's considered rude to shoot the person who's going to be keeping your ass safe. Naruto looked in the direction the arrow had been shot to see a young boy who looked like a younger, not fat version of Michiru. He was wearing what looked like a long, white kimono that split at the bottom and had blue triangles bordering it. Below that were dark gray pants and brown boots. A white shoulder cape of the same color and design as the kimono was also being worn as some kind of decorative piece. Lastly, he had a quiver strapped to his back and was holding a bow in his hand, signifying him as the one who shot the arrow that would have him Naruto were it not for his fast reflexes. Naruto already didn't like him. Just looking at the child let him know the boy was likely a spoiled brat. And what the hell was with the douchebaggish cape? I would suggest not doing it again, lest you end up pissing off the wrong person. The young brat glared balefully at Naruto, who returned the stare with one of his own. Ah, I hope you'll forgive Hikaru, Michiru said. He's at that mischievous stage that boys go through. Whatever, Naruto mumbled, turning and beginning to walk away. I'm going to begin checking the caravan and creating a patrol route. You guys do whatever it is you do. And with that, Naruto disappeared in a blur of speed. Wow, Michiru said as Hikaru gawked at where Naruto used to be. So fast, is this the power of a ninja? Partly, however, Naruto is stronger than most ninja his age, Jiraiya stated proudly. No matter if Naruto hated him or not, he was still proud of how strong his godson had become. He's actually the most promising of our newest generation of Leaf Ninja. Is that so? Michiru was suitably impressed, which would have caused Jiraiya to laugh some more as he told the man tales of how great his apprentice was, but there was business to be done. Bragging could wait until later. XOX. The caravan had begun to move again. Slowly at first, but with increasing speed as the horses pulled the large wagons. Laden so full with crap only someone who was super rich and not afraid to waste their money would bother to buy that it looked like each one weighed a ton. Despite the heavy loads, the steeds didn't seem to be complaining. Maybe they were used to lugging around loads of crap. Naruto found himself perched on top of one of the wagons, using it as a lookout point so he could see the entire operation from where he was. All around caravan walked a large number of clones, 50 in all. Their job was to dispel if they saw something out of the ordinary so that Naruto could deal with it. That was the problem with clones, he lamented. They couldn't do any more because they were so weak. Even if they had all of his abilities and a good portion of his chakra, one good hit would destroy them. He really needed to find a way to make them stronger. Nothing was impossible, and Naruto was sure this wasn't either. All it would take was a little hard work and gumption. Maybe he could use Kyuubi's chakra to enhance them. Naruto wondered what such a thing would do. It could make his clones more durable and able to at least take a few hits before dispelling, or it might have disastrous results like making the clone unstable enough that it could explode. Which would actually be kind of useful. The exploding clone jutsu was a powerful technique. How powerful would exploding clones be when filled to the brim with Kyuubi's chakra be? Hee, Naruto chuckled. I could just imagine the explosion that would make. The image of one of his clones blowing up and destroying a small mountain appeared in his mind. That would definitely be awesome. His small moment of amusement was short-lived, as the poor mood he had been in since discovering his heritage and that Jiraiya was his godfather returned. Sighing, the whisker-marked shinobi got back to work, looking out over the barren wasteland the caravan was currently passing through. Naruto wasn't quite sure what sort of environment this place would be considered. It was boiling hot like the desert of Suna, but there was none of the sand associated with that place. It was really just dried up and cracked gravel with loads of rocks. Could this terrain even be considered a desert then? Better stick to barren wasteland. Right now the caravan was moving next to a large mountain range made of steep cliff faces. As Naruto looked up at the giant cliff that was probably around the same size as the Hokage monument in Konoha, his mind went through the information about the mission he and the pervert had been given. They were actually on a B-rank mission, which would normally be given to a 4-man squad of 1 Jonin and 3 Chunin. With all of their ninja already on various missions, he and Jiraiya had been the only ones with a high enough rank in the ninja hierarchy to qualify. If they had not been able to do it, then Tsunade would have been forced to give the mission to a group of genin. Not a very good prospect for what could end up being a difficult mission. They were protecting a prince, after all, one who had enough money that he could pretty much spend millions of it on a whim without a care in the world. It was unlikely that this mission would end up going off without a hitch. Especially now that he was here. No doubt Murphy was going to find some way to screw them over before the end of this journey. You're always so cynical. I think I have a right to be, Naruto said, rolling his eyes. Just look at my mission record. My first C rank turned into an A rank where I fought Zabuza and Haku, then the Chunin exams came, and then there was the Sasuke retrieval disaster. And let's not forget that mission to Tetsu no Kuni where I fought that prick Ao, and the one in Tori no Kuni with the cursed warrior. I think I have a right to be cynical when it comes to the missions I'm undertaking. Point taken. You have some of the shittiest luck I've seen for this type of stuff. You're the biggest magnet for trouble I've met. Oh gee, thanks. Continuing his survey of the area, his eyes strayed over to the front where Jiraiya was walking alongside the prince's carriage, talking to the prince about something with animated gestures and loud belly-aching laughter. Naruto glared at the man for a moment, then decided to ignore him and focus on the carriage itself. It really was one of the most fancy-looking carriages he had ever seen. A large white carriage with golden accents and designs. It looked much more streamlined than the other carriage, which were all large, bulky and plain-looking. The thing was obviously designed with the intention of making people green with envy. Just then, one of the shadow clones guarding the caravan dispelled, sending all of its memories back to Naruto. This was followed by several more dispelling in quick succession. Naruto's eyes fluttered a bit as images bombarded his mind. Images he got from the clone's memories. Images of several dozen people dressed in filthy rags and bearing rusted weapons. Bandits or highwaymen most likely. Opening his eyes, the blonde Uzume turned his head and looked up at the ledge the caravan was currently traveling alongside of. There, running down the ledge with weapons bared, were several bandits, all of whom were screaming like a bunch of idiots. Naruto smiled. He had been hoping for an opportunity to release some pent-up tension for a while now. He was so pleased to see his wish had finally been granted. XOX. That was awfully brutal of you. Kyuubi. Naruto perked up at the sound of the voice he had not heard since some time yesterday morning passed through his mind. Are you finally talking to me? Would you rather I not talk to you? No. I didn't mean it like that. Naruto was quick to let her know he wasn't being rude or sarcastic or anything like that. As strange as their odd relationship was, he did not want to give it up, especially when she was the only person he could now talk to since he couldn't even stand the sight of Jiraiya. I was just surprised. That's all. I didn't expect you to start talking to me after you cut out so abruptly. I was bored. Huh. Naruto sighed. Figures. With a deep expelling of breath, Naruto fell backwards on the futon he had been sitting on and looked up at the sky. It was nighttime now. The stars painted the velvety canvas above him like a billion small beacons in the night sky. He had to admit, it made for a fantastic sight. You were awfully brutal during that battle today, Kyuubi continued along her previous line of thought. You mean when I fought those bandits? I don't think I've ever seen you kill someone so violently. At least, not since that time in Nami no Kuni. Naruto closed his eyes, remembering that time in Nami, the day where Haku had died. I have to admit, I was a little shocked at how violently you ripped that guy with the pickaxe apart. Naruto grimaced as he remembered the battle, if someone could even consider that slaughter a battle. It had been so one-sided that to call it a complete massacre wouldn't even begin to describe how poorly that fight had gone for the bandits arrayed against Naruto. Well, I've been pretty angry recently. What with the pervert withholding information on my parents on top of being my godfather who abandoned me to the hatred of an entire village for 13 years of my life. I wonder how long you're going to hold on to your hatred for. Naruto frowned. What do you mean by that? I mean you have never been one to let your hatred get the better of you. You even decided to forgive the villagers of Konoha for treating you like utter shit for years. Yet you hold a lot of anger towards your godfather. It's because he's my godfather that I'm so angry at him. Naruto closed his eyes as his mind went over the issues he had with the man who should have raised him. I can forgive the villagers of their ignorance because they don't know any better. Sure, they could have taken the time to get to know me, but by the time I was old enough for them to possibly move past their hatred, I was beginning to play pranks in order to get attention, which did not endear me to anyone. Naruto let out a heavy sigh. On the other hand, Jiraiya is my godfather, and he does no better. He was the one who taught my dad everything he knows about seals, so he knew damn well that I was not you. That means he ignored me not out of irrational hatred, but out of negligence. I can't forgive something like that. Doesn't the pervert have a spy network to take care of? That doesn't change anything, Kyuubi. Jiraiya had to have at least visited Konoha on occasion to give a report or something. Even if he only spent a week out of the entire year every time he came into Konoha with me, I would have been satisfied, but he didn't. He ignored me. I didn't even know I had a godfather until he told me. And now you're upset that he didn't spend time with you. You humans are always so emotional. I wonder, is it because of how short-lived your species are? Yeah, well, I'm not really human anymore, am I? Was Naruto's bitter reply. Are you still upset about that? I had thought you had gotten over it. I guess it's just now starting to really hit me, Naruto admitted. Truth be told, after Kyuubi had revealed her theory on what had happened to him after he absorbed half of her chakra, he had pretty much forgotten all about the possibility that he may be immortal. There had been more important things to worry about: the Chunin exams, the invasion, Sarutobi dying, the search for Tsunade and his rising in rank to Chunin. In the wake of all that happened, the knowledge that he was not quite human anymore had been pushed into the deepest recesses of his mind. His battle with Gurren had brought those realizations back. Gurren, who was more powerful than him, more skilled than him, and just plain better than him. Despite his incredible disadvantage, he had managed to fight her on mostly even ground. It was not because of his talent as a ninja, nor because of his skills and unpredictability. It had been because of his ability to regenerate from any damage received at an astounding rate. Cuts were healed in seconds, broken bones in minutes. Even getting impaled by a crystal javelin did not keep him down for long. His body had taken all the punishment Gurren could give him and simply healed right back up, allowing him to fight longer and harder than what should have been possible for someone of his skill level. You had better get over that hang-up quickly, Kyuubi advised him. Such thoughts will only hold you down from reaching your potential. Whatever, Naruto sighed as he wrapped the blanket he had been using to keep warm around him tighter. I'm done with this conversation. Uzumaki Naruto closed his eyes and tried to get some sleep. However, no matter how hard he tried, sleep would not come. The next day, he would be incredibly irritable. XOX. Naruto found himself sighing as he realized why the other people who had been hired before him and the old pervert to guard Michiru and Hikaru quit. It wasn't because they couldn't handle the danger, but because they were disgusted by just how lavish and wasteful the prince was. The man really did spend money without a care in the world. The group had arrived in a small city not too long ago. It was a nice-looking community surrounded by grassy plains. The architecture all followed the same scheme, tan and red brick walls with red tiled roofing. Most of the buildings were houses or apartments where people lived, but there were also a number of shops and stores. Naruto couldn't help but find the peaceful atmosphere soothing. However, while they were moving through the town, Hikaru had seen a large sign mentioning the circus that was going on in town. Michiru, being the rich and wasteful slob that he was, had no issue spoiling the brat rotten by agreeing to stop for the day so he could buy tickets to see the show. "You shouldn't complain too much," Kyuubi said as she lay against her fluffy pillows, all 9 of her tails arrayed around her like some kind of majestic robe. She was watching everything through Naruto's eyes. Even though she had seen circus before, this was the first time in about 200 years that she had been able to. It was interesting to see what new acts humans came up with. "At least Michiru bought tickets for you and the pervert as well." Naruto scowled at the mention of his godfather. His eyes quickly flickered over to the man in question, who was sitting next to Hikaru and Michiru while Naruto sat further back. As if sensing his gaze burning a hole through his back, Jiraiya turned around to look at him. At the same time, Naruto looked back at the woman sitting on the trunk of an elephant that was balancing on its hind legs. Maybe it was just because he was a shinobi, but the sight wasn't all that impressive. "I guess you're right," Naruto sighed as he leaned back in his seat and tried to enjoy the show. "Of course I'm right. When will you realize, my dear Naruto-kun, that I am always right?" Naruto snorted with barely restrained laughter. He didn't know if she was using that haughty tone for comedic purpose, but he couldn't deny Kyuubi sounded very funny when she spoke with such blatant narcissism. The circus acts weren't all bad, Naruto decided as time wore on. Sure, the one where that lady was directing rhinos around in a circle while she stood in the middle with a whip was boring as hell, but the one after that where the man managed to balance 6 sticks with spinning plates, 1 on each foot and 2 for each hand, with squirrels in each plate running around to help them spin was pretty damn impressive. There was also one act where 4 polar bears dressed in yellows vests with red bow ties and top hats moved around the ring while balancing on bright, multicolored beach balls. That was pretty cool too. Naruto's favorite act by far had to be the boxing kangaroos. Of course that would be your favorite, Kyuubi huffed from inside the seal. "You boys and your enjoyment of senseless violence. I swear, no matter how much time passes, human males never change." Naruto shrugged. "I guess I can't really argue with you there," he admitted. "Still, I don't think this is something only men would enjoy." He paused, thinking, "I'm actually pretty sure Sakura would be into this kind of thing as well." "Probably," Kyuubi sounded amused. "I can actually picture the pink one standing up in her seat, swinging her fists as she cheered to see a good fight." Naruto grinned as he got an amusing image of his pink-haired former teammate standing in her seat, swinging her arms haphazardly, decking several people in the face without knowing it, all the while yelling, "Fight, fight, fight." Like those party-goers who enjoy watching people in drinking contests yell, "Chug, chug, chug." It was definitely an amusing image. "I can see that too." Before Kyuubi could say anything more, the lights dimmed. Naruto sat up in his seat as a single spotlight played on the main circus ring that most of the acts had taken place either on or around. The ringleader, a man with sandy brown hair, a mustache, and wearing a red suit with a large top hat, stepped onto the ring, a microphone in his hand. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's the moment you've all been waiting for." The ringleader's voice blared loudly over the speakers. "The one, the only, Chamu, the saber-toothed tiger." "A saber-toothed tiger?" Kyuubi perked up. "Here. In a circus. Something wrong, Kyuubi?" asked Naruto. The single spotlight disappeared as several different spotlights of varying color flickered on around the room. The lights began moving as a drum roll commenced. "Naruto, saber-toothed tigers are extremely rare," Kyuubi told him. She sounded a bit frustrated for some reason. "So rare that before I was sealed, I had not seen one for over 200 years. You humans hunted them to extinction." Obviously not if there's one still around, Naruto pointed out. Kyuubi growled. Seriously, Kyuubi. What's up? I don't think I've ever heard you get angry like this. Well, he added when he heard her snort, not over something like this at any rate. I'm not angry, Kyuubi denied, I'm just annoyed. Why? I thought you would be happy to know something like this. You wouldn't understand. Naruto sighed at her words. That was Kyuubi's answer every time he asked a question that managed to bring up something she didn't like, or something that brought back memories she was not fond of. He wondered what these particular memories were about, but knew he would not be getting those answers out of his tenant for a while, if ever. He turned his attention back to the stage. The colored spotlights all converged in one area several feet above the ring and to the left, creating what looked like a rounded triangle of light. In the center of this triangle was the creature that could only be Chamu. Chamu was a very large tiger, easily the size of a standard human in length, though only coming up to the waist of a full-grown adult. It was a powerful-looking creature, with strong-looking muscles, sharp claws and a sleek body that looked streamlined. Clearly, this Chamu was built for speed. It had dark gray skin and a white underbelly that extended all the way to its face and 3 diamond patterns of darker fur on its head. Wrapped around its neck like some kind of scarf or cape was a bandana that was tied at the end. Beneath that and around its upper torso was a dark brown vest with lighter brown accents. Like all felines, it had 3 whiskers on each side of its face. Perhaps the most startling feature about this saber-toothed tiger was the bright yellow eyes that seemed unnaturally sharp and the very large, very sharp-looking fangs jutting from its upper lip. Those were some seriously intimidating teeth. And the dental coverage must be a bitch for those. Chamu let out a low growl before unleashing a giant roar that had Hikaru gasping in awe and Michiru looking like he was about to shit himself. That, more than anything else, Naruto found amusing. Acting with what looked like practiced ease, Chamu jumped from the platform he was on to another platform embedded into the wall, then finally the circular platform within the ring. The ringleader quickly jumped up as Chamu gazed at everything around him. As rare as he is dangerous. Chamu is the only one of his kind in captivity. Of course, Kyuubi growled, naturally the only thing that man is proud of is how dangerous that saber-tooth is and how he's essentially enslaved here. Kyuubi. Or upset at seeing someone besides yourself being forced into captivity. Che. Of course not. Saber-toothed tigers may be intelligent, but they're still just animals. Why should I care about an animal? I don't know. I was just asking. Well, you can stop asking. Alright, no need to get upset. Yeesh. Someone's touchy today. What was that? Nothing. And here's Chamu's friend and partner, Kiki. The hell kind of a name is Kiki? The dumb kind. More spotlights appeared, this time hovering in the air as a tiny chimpanzee with the same bandana and vest scheme only in reverse colors descended after flipping off a high bar and landed on Chamu's head. Everyone clapped as the tiny monkey stood up, took off its hat and bowed the crowd. And now, Chamu and Kiki have a very special treat for you. Naruto raised an eyebrow as Kiki climbed onto a tiny platform being raised into the air by a tall tripod. A ball was tossed to him, which he soon tossed to Chamu. The ball was then tossed back when the saber-toothed tiger hit it with his head, after which it went back to Kiki before being returned by the chimp smacking it with his tail. Alright, Naruto said suddenly as he watched Chamu jump extremely high in the air for not being chakra enhanced so he could smack the ball back to Kiki. That's actually kind of impressive. I wonder how they trained him to do that. Kyuubi scoffed. You don't train a saber-toothed tiger, Naruto, they're impossible to train. You're more than likely to get your head bitten off by it than you are to successfully train something like that. Then how is it doing all those tricks? I imagine they managed to coax it into doing that somehow. The monkey probably has something to do with it. Naruto looked over at the chimpanzee just as it hit the ball back to Chamu. He didn't think a monkey would be that smart, but then, he didn't know much about monkeys. For all he knew, it could be super smart. Considering your kind is derived from apes, I don't think you have much room to insult the intelligence of a monkey. OWCH. Claws out today, Kyuubi. They're always out. You know that. Chamu ended up doing a few more tricks, namely, jumping through rings that were lit on fire. After the last of the tricks, Chamu jumped back onto the platform. Kiki dropped on his head again, an apple in its hand this time. It took bite of the red fruit, then tossed it into the air where an arrow from a man who had walked into the ring shot it down and pinned it to the wall. As everyone else clapped, Naruto snorted. He could have tossed a kunai through that apple with no trouble. Shooting an arrow and throwing a kunai are very different things, Naruto. Arrows require a lot more concentration, precision and skill to shoot. Naruto huffed a bit, but didn't say anything. He knew if he did, Kyuubi would just use it as an opportunity to mess with him. If you think that was hard, then watch this. Kiki began spinning the apple on one of its fingers. It lifted the spinning apple above its head as Chamu stood up on his hind legs. The pair wobbled a bit, whether on purpose or because Chamu's balance was precarious was unknown. Whatever the case was, moving around like that would most certainly present a harder target for the archer to hit. If he's off even a fraction of an inch, it's goodbye Kiki. Oh please, Naruto gave a derisive snort, making some of the people sitting near him look at him oddly. He ignored them. There are 360 degrees he could shoot his bow, and that's not even going into angles. If the idiot misses, chances are he's going to shoot wide and miss the apple and monkey entirely. Does that man honestly expect people to not realize this? Not everyone's a shinobi, you know, Kyuubi reminded Naruto as she caressed her tails and watched the scene through Naruto's eyes. While she wouldn't say she was enjoying the show, it was at least something different from what she usually saw. That, and she wasn't cynical like Naruto was being. All of these people are civilians. They're so easy to manipulate it's ridiculous. These people will eat up that man's words like they were coming from Kami just because they want a good show. I guess. Good. Now shut up and watch. Naruto rolled his eyes. Yes, ma'am. The archer soon knocked an arrow back against his bow and pulled the strong taut. While he was taking aim, the ringleader spoke up. All right. We need absolute silence everyone. If he needed absolute silence then he should make the idiot doing the drum roll stop. My, aren't you the cynic today? While the drum roll created a lot of noise, the entire crowd had gone silent as they waited on bated breath to see if the archer would be able to hit the apple. Even Naruto was leaning forward in his seat, getting drawn into the suspense in spite of himself. The archer set his sights on the apple, one eye closed to a squint as he prepared to unleash the arrow knocked back in his bow. The apple was hit, but not by the archer. Naruto blinked as he stared at the apple as it rolled across the ground, a suction cup arrow stuck to it. He turned and saw the brat, Hikaru, standing with his bow out and the string trembling from when it released the arrow. Huh, Naruto blinked. Well, color me orange, the kid's actually not a half bad shot. If someone actually colored you orange I would melt them. It was a figure of speech, Kyuubi. Easy shot. Even from the distance Naruto was sitting from the others, he managed to easily pick up the words. Wow, arrogant much. Considering you act even more arrogant than he does more than half the time, I don't think you have any right to talk. Keyword being, act, Kyuubi. I know my own limitations, and I know not to be overconfident when my opponent has me outclassed. Don't forget that I just barely managed to stay alive when I fought Gurren. HMPH. Bravo. The ringleader shouted, apparently deciding to just make this part of the act. Naruto had to hand it to the man. At least he knew how to go with the flow. Good eye Sonny. He clapped for a moment. However, let's see you handle this. Apple once more in hand, Kiki began spinning the red fruit on his finger. Chamu jumped off the platform and began running around in a circle, presenting a much harder target to hit than he had the last time. This one would actually take a good amount of skill to hit. Naruto could do so, of course, but only when using kunai. Ten-chan could hit that thing easily, Naruto thought fondly to himself. No doubt if Tenten were here, she would have made this entire spectacle a competition with the kid. And kicked his ass in the process. I wonder if she knows how to use a bow. I wouldn't doubt it. That girl's a weapons fanatic the likes of which I have never seen before. And that's saying something. Naruto watched as once again, Hikaru let the arrow fly. And once again, the arrow hit the apple dead center. Wow. Everyone soon began clapping for the boy who had proved to be an amazing shot. Naruto didn't, even though he was actually kind of impressed. But that was just because it would be too much of a hassle to actually clap. Kami that sounded a lot like Shikamaru. The ringleader walked up to Hikaru, a large grin on his face. What a great shot. I've never seen anything like it. I've made harder shots than that. Hikaru pretended to act all nonchalant, even though Naruto could tell the brat was preening. Wow, hamming it up much. You have no right to talk about hamming anything up. I'm not that bad, am I? Do you want me to answer that? Not really. The ringleader put a hand under his elbow and the other hand cupped his chin as a thoughtful look crossed his face. You deserve a prize for a shot like that. Yes, now, let me see, what do you think about A? I want him, Hikaru interrupted, pointing at the saber-toothed tiger that was walking around the platform. Naruto snickered. Of course the brat would want the largest, most dangerous creature there. Wah, you mean Chamu? Oh, he's too big and dangerous, sonny. Besides, with Chamu gone I wouldn't have a show. I don't care. I want him. Naruto scowled at the brat's words. Like father like son. It seemed the apple didn't fall very far from the tree. The ringleader tried to get the young boy to see reason, but the spoiled little turd wasn't listening anymore. He just turned to his slightly drunk dad. Father, please. Sure, why not? Michiru said cheerfully after he finished his drink. His pink cheeks let Naruto know the man was really feeling the alcohol. You know I've always wanted my own circus. Why don't we buy the whole thing, tent and all? Even Jiraiya seemed surprised by that statement. Sitting where he was next to Michiru, the white-haired man spewed out all of the sake he had been drinking and began pounding his chest with a fist as he coughed. Naruto sighed. So this is how that idiot treats his son. Buying him whatever the hell he wants. No wonder the brat's so damn spoiled. Do you know how I dealt with spoiled brats I didn't like? No, I don't. Naruto perked up a bit, intrigued. How'd you deal with little shits like that? I ate them. Naruto's sweat dropped. She wasn't being serious, was she? He hoped not, or he might never be able to look at Kyuubi the same way again. See, somehow, I don't think me eating the kid would turn out well. HMPH. Your loss. Single quote. Right. XOX. Hikaru had a very smug smile on his face as he watched his father hand the shaky ringleader a check for the circus. The man in the red suit looked like he was going to start crying in joy any minute now. His whole body was shaking. Naturally, it was because the check with more zeros in it than the budget for most kingdoms. Who says money can't buy everything? All around them, the people working for the circus were taking things down and putting it away for the journey to Tsuki no Kuni. Hikaru didn't pay much attention to them. He didn't really care about the rest of the circus. Just the tiger. Well, to be honest, I've always wanted to do a show in Tsuki no Kuni. It's a delightful place from all I've heard. As Hikaru walked beside his father, who was speaking to the ringleader about something, Hikaru didn't care what, a sight caught the young boy's attention. Chamu was resting on several crates, his front paws being used as pillows. Meanwhile, the monkey, Kiki, looked like he was about to feed the tiger an apple as the much larger beast yawned widely. He probably would have too, if he had not spotted Hikaru and bolted for it. Hikaru walked up to the lounging saber-tooth and picked up the apple Kiki had dropped. He leaned forward, offering the fruity treat to the tiger. Hungry. At the sound of his voice, Chamu's eyes snapped open and a growl escaped the tiger's lips. Hikaru backed away, eyes widening in fear as the over 600-pound tiger stood up and glared at him with lips pulled back into a deadly-looking snarl. The tiger roared, causing Hikaru to fall backwards and land on his bum with a yelp of fright. The young boy's eyes quivered as he stared at the now terrifying creature before him. What had once seemed like such a tame animal now looked like a wild beast ready to rip him limb from limb. Ah, sonny. Hikaru. The sound of the ringleader and his father wasn't even heard by the boy as he found himself staring into the eyes of his death. Those dangerous yellow eyes that seemed to speak of untold violence and a desire to kill were glaring at him, and Hikaru could see his life begin flashing before his eyes. Chamu looked just about ready to lunge when a blur of black and orange appeared between them. Sit down, Naruto snarled as he stood in front of the quivering Hikaru and faced down the enraged tiger. Chamu backed up a step, but quickly regained his bearings and roared at Naruto in return, but the blonde did not back down. Instead, his irises began to bleed red and his pupils became black slits as an aura of pure, unbridled power threatened to wash over everyone in the clearing. Naruto's lips peeled back in a snarl that was every bit as feral as the one Chamu was giving. Sit. Down. Now. For a moment, the saber-toothed tiger looked as if he were considering attacking the blonde anyways. After several seconds of nothing happening, Chamu eventually did as told and sat down on his haunches. Naruto smiled. Good boy. The blonde reached up and began absently caressing the large tiger behind the ear. Everyone in the vicinity, including the ringleader, was shocked when the giant cat with claws closed his eyes and began to purr. Would you look at that? The ringleader gawked at the sight of the fearsome and terrifying Chamu, purring like some kind of house kitten. I've never seen Chamu let anyone get close to him. He doesn't even let me get too close to him. How is he doing that? Jiraiya, who had also been walking with Michiru and Hikaru, watched Naruto work his magic on the large tiger. Only he knew what Naruto had done, using the Kyuubi's chakra to overpower Chamu's rage by showing the saber-tooth that he was the bigger predator. It was an impressive way to deal with something like this, to be sure. And it didn't even end in bloodshed. After a few seconds of pampering the giant cat's head, Naruto sighed and stood up from where he was crouched. He turned around to look at Hikaru, who was still trembling as he stared between Naruto and Chamu. "Geez, kid, you really are a bundle of trouble, you know?" asked Naruto, shaking his head a bit before sticking his hand out for the boy to take. "You all right?" Hikaru stared at the hand being offered to him like it was something foreign. His mind was still reeling from the shock of the past few seconds. After nearly a second of staring, he slapped the hand away and quickly bolted from the scene, leaving Naruto to stare after him. "Hikaru! Hikaru!" Michiru shouted after his son to no avail. The man looked like he wanted to chase after the boy, but decided not to in the end. Probably because he was so damn fat he wouldn't be able to catch up with the child anyways. What an ungrateful little. Naruto sighed, releasing a huge gust of breath. He looked down at Chamu, who was staring up at him with curious yellow eyes, and grinned. "Come on, Chamu. Why don't we go find your friend?" With that, the strange pair of boy and tiger decided to make their own exit from the scene. But not before a certain Kitsune left her own parting comment. Trying to add, "Beast Tamer, to your resume, Naruto." Naruto rolled his eyes at the woman's teasing tone. Some things would just never change. Oh, hush up. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next part.